Chapter 676. Burning the Eastern Azure wood with a raging fire would instantly disrupt the flow of spiritual qi in the entire formation. Then, the raging flames from the burning of the Eastern Azure would be directed to the Western Gung metal, burning the formation foundation of the Western Gung metal into ashes. With the destruction of the Eastern and Western formation bases, the energy in the formation was immediately thrown into a mess. The energy in the north and south of the formation bases froze in an instant, like the glaciers in the Northern Ocean. The formation was still constantly extracting energy from the surrounding 10,000 miles for its own use, but it could no longer be vented and turned into bolts of lightning to attack the enemy. The natural powers of the water gate and the fire gate in the north and the fire gate in the south were crazily compressed and frozen. Gradually, a dark cloud of frost appeared in the north, shrouding the mountains within thousands of miles like an iron curtain. In the south, a glowing red cloud of fire emerged. The color of the cloud of fire grew darker and darker, like a piece of white glass with blood dripping into it, quickly turning crimson. Both of these two masses of energy were thousands of miles wide, constantly thickening and compressing, gradually turning into two terrible energy storms. If anyone dared to rush into these two masses of energy, they could detonate them with just a little bit of magic power and blow the immortals hiding in them to pieces. Even gold immortals would not dare to take risks in a mass of energy thousands of miles in circumference. Now the eastern side of the formation was burning like a pit of fire, green wood and earth fire, as well as dozens of volcanoes that kept shooting up into the sky, were so hot that they could melt gold and iron. Even the clouds in the sky were burned to nothingness, making it difficult for both immortals and mortals to pass through. In the west, the white energy of metal element was quickly dissipating, along with the fire unleashed by Wuxia. Wuxia carefully controlled the intensity of the fire, turning the mountains in the west into a thoroughfare that mortals could pass through. Outside the formation, tens of thousands of Great Yu army arrived with a sonorous sound of a dragon horn. Tens of thousands of soldiers boarded flying ships and swarmed into the formation, turning into a dark cloud that blotted out a large part of the sky. Arrows fell like raindrops, and bone talismans turned into tornadoes that swept across the sky. Powerful Zhong province generals, clad in golden armors and carrying heavy, custom-made weapons, unleashed gusts of wind around them, causing the immortals in the formation to stumble and flee in panic. The immortals controlling the formation on the mountain suffered a backlash from the chaotic energy, and dozens of the strongest immortals exploded and died on the spot. Their bodies exploded, blowing up all the palaces and mansions on the mountain, as well as the secret caves hidden in the mountain. The enormous mountain was broken in the middle, and a 10 miles tall mountaintop slowly rolled down to the ground. The deafening boom broke people's eardrums and made them bleed from their ears. The ground was shaking violently, and clouds of dust and smoke rose straight into the sky. Trapped in the formation, the despairing soldiers of Great Yu cheered together. Somehow, they mustered up the strength to kill the immortals and itinerant cultivators who were besieging them. The last batch of arrows were shot out, the last few bone talismans were thrown out, and the remaining oracles poured out their last bit of power, transforming into a vast ocean of flame and thunderbolts, burning thousands of cultivators with low cultivation bases to death. Wuxia ordered the soldiers to fly the jade armor dark turtle flying ship over the heads of the trapped soldiers, and help them board the ship. Of the 30,000 strong army, only slightly more than 10,000 were left unscathed. 4,000 to 5,000 were killed, and another 7,000 to 8,000 were seriously injured. All the wounded and dead were sent to the ship as quickly as possible. After that, Wuxia directed the ship to charge at the disorderly immortals and itinerant cultivators on the mountain. The ship was stored with a large amount of ordnance. The soldiers who boarded the ship did not have time to wipe their sweat or take a breather. Instead, they carried large bundles of specially made arrows and rushed to the holes on both sides of the ship, shooting wildly at the immortals and itinerant cultivators who were flying around in the sky. The panting oracles, who had exhausted all their magic power, took the potions from the logisticians to quickly replenish their magic power, and gulped them down. Then they grabbed a large number of lethal bone talismans and all kinds of powerful one-time use magic items, and angrily climbed to the upper deck of the ship. Then, they attacked the immortals and loose immortals outside the windows that had been specially opened. Thousands of immortals and itinerant cultivators surrounded Wuxia's ship and unleashed countless spells like a storm. But the ship was very slow and was one of the slowest flying ships of Diyu's army, but its defense was amazing. When the spells hit the ship's outer shell, they only created a lot of sparks and didn't even leave a mark on it. Some of the immortals' flying swords were of slightly inferior quality. When a sword beam landed on the ship was fine, but the flying swords were bounced back and broken into several pieces. Quite a few immortals suffered in this way. Their swords, which they had cultivated with their lives, were broken by the flying boat, and they coughed up blood and nearly fell from the clouds. What made them even more panicked was that not only was the formation destroyed, but the energy inside it had also become chaotic. The metal element energy had completely disappeared. The wood element energy was constantly transforming into a flaming storm, and the water element energy in the north and the fire element energy in the south had condensed into a terrible energy bomb. No one could absorb any energy from it. Only the earth element energy in the center was still calm, as the broken formation was still constantly extracting the earth element energy from the ground and dispersing it into the void. However, earth element energy was mostly used to deploy all kinds of defensive spells, and the most common attacks used by ordinary immortals were flames, flying daggers, xianbing, and a few others. Now that the metal element, fire element, and water element energy could not be used, the overall strength of immortals and itinerant cultivators was reduced by half. In just a quarter of an hour, Wuxia's ship had approached the broken mountain by tens of miles. A deck at the belly of the ship was moved away, revealing 3 polygonal crystal pillars arranged in a triangular formation. Countless runes could be vaguely seen in the crystal pillars, and wisps of lightning kept shooting out of them. Behind the pillars was a huge crystal body, where a large group of oracles were filling boxes and boxes of energy stones and immortal stones into a blazing cauldron. This was the only large-scale weapon of war equipped with the Jade Armor Dark Turtle flying ship. It was made by the oracles of the Directorate of Celestials who specialized in thunder magic and the skilled craftsmen of the military court, and was called the Thunder Slaughtering Slaughter. The principle of this weapon was very simple. After gathering a large amount of energy, it would be transformed by the formation into a powerful thunderbolt, just like how immortals unleashed all kinds of immortal thunders. However, when immortals unleashed thunder magic, they still had to consider the backlash of immortal energy and other complicated issues. But the Thunder Slaughtering Slaughter did not have such concerns. All the materials used to make this weapon were the strongest that could be found on Pangu continent, and it even contained a hint of innate energy. When it was filled with enough immortal stones and energy stones, its power was strong enough to kill a top-tier gold immortal who was protected by an immortal artifact. Every time this powerful weapon was unleashed, a brilliant talisman master had to inscribe a new energy-gathering formation on it. In other words, the jade-shelled mystic turtle flying ship could only launch one attack in a battle. However, if this attack hit its target, the damage it would cause would be extremely shocking. The whole flying ship was enveloped in a strong light. A purple-blue thunderbolt about 5 miles in diameter rushed out from the bottom of the ship's belly, then quickly expanded to 100 miles in circumference. Accompanied by a deep rumble of thunder, the flying ship suddenly shot tens of miles into the sky, and in the next moment, a thunderbolt with a diameter of 100 miles whistled through the air toward the collapsed mountain in front of it. Along the way, countless immortals and cultivators who stood in its way were silently turned into nothingness by the thunderbolt. Several gold immortals, who were exhausted from the battle with the generals of Zhong province, wailed as they stared at the incoming thunderbolt. They did not even have the strength to activate their defensive gold immortal artifacts, and could only struggle a little in the thunderbolt before they were completely turned into wisps of smoke. The thunderbolt pierced through the middle of the mountain, for thousands of miles in circumference, and sank into the ground at an oblique angle. The last bit of the foundation of the fog formation was finally shattered, and thousands of heaven immortals and itinerant cultivators on the mountain were turned into ashes by the strike. Even those gold immortals with the highest cultivation base were affected by the thunderbolt and suffered serious injuries. Accompanied by a shrill whistle, the gold immortals summoned the remaining heaven immortals and cultivators nearby, and prepared to flee in a direction. They could not escape from the west, for the flying ship was blocking their way. Behind it, tens of thousands of Du soldiers were charging from the west, killing heads and splattering blood all over the sky. They could not escape from the north or the south, for the water element energy and fire element energy were gathering crazily. They were two huge energy bombs, and once touched, they could explode and drag everyone into it. The only way out was to the east. However, the wood elemental energy in the east was being madly burned by the Great Fire, and dozens of huge volcanoes were erupting. Lava rose hundreds of miles into the air, and poisonous flames and black smoke were spewing all over the sky, distorting the void in that part of the world. High up in the sky, 9 huge fireballs kept shooting out countless fire arrows, turning that part of the void into a world of fire. That was the only way out. There was no other way out. One of the strongest gold immortals threw his head back and let out a long roar, then led a group of despondent immortals and itinerant cultivators toward the east. The gold immortal leaped into a beam of purple light and carried a few of his close friends as he fled toward the east. Then he turned back and roared at Wuxia's flying ship. "You are lucky to have broken my formation today. I will definitely repay you handsomely in the future." Wuxia smiled and shook his head as he looked at the thousands of immortals who were fleeing in panic. Lucky to have broken the formation? TSK, how could this be luck? It was clearly because the formation you laid out was too simple. If it was a little more complicated, instead of simply using the elemental energies of the 5 elements, you could have added the transformations of the stars and the evils of the earth into it, and I wouldn't have been able to break it so easily. Hehe, you are indeed fleeing from the east, from the Greenwood Gate. Wuxia whistled softly and closed his eyes, unable to bear the sight. Raging flames rose into the sky, filling the sky with raging flames. The immortals who fled from the Greenwood Gate were reduced to ashes in the sea of fire, howling and wailing. Apart from those gold immortals and their close disciples who were protected by them, all the other immortals and cultivators of Myriad Immortal Alliance had disappeared without a trace in the infernal inferno, howling miserably. With great difficulty, the group of over 100 gold immortals led 300 to 400 of their disciples and friends out of the sea of fire that stretched for thousands of miles, only to be greeted by a jade-armored dark turtle flying ship. A shrill ghost howl rose into the sky, and those gold immortals, who had exhausted their magic power, howled in despair. At least 70% of the gold immortals burst into a strong purple light at the same time. They had burned their immortal souls. Chapter 677. Burning the immortal soul was a desperate ultimate move used by immortals. After burning the immortal soul, even if one managed to kill the enemy and escape, all his cultivation base would be gone, and he could only reincarnate with his true spirit. However, once he burned his immortal soul, he would be able to unleash a terrifying power that was 10 times stronger than his own strength for a short period of time. Although it could only last for a quarter of an hour, that quarter of an hour was enough for an immortal to destroy many things. When Wuxia finally calmed the chaotic energy in the formation, neutralized the 2 energy bombs in the north and south, and steered the ship through the gradually calming volcanic zone, the battle between Bo Yenting and the 100 fleeing gold immortals was over. The 100 gold immortals were all killed, as were the immortals they brought with them. But the 3 layers of armor around Bo Yenting's ship was also blown to pieces, and hundreds of oracles were killed or wounded. Fortunately, the ship itself was not damaged. As long as it was sent to the workshop under the military court in Liangzhu and re-equipped with the 3 layers of armor, it would still be intact. Although hundreds of oracles had been killed or wounded, Bo Yenting was still in high spirits. Over 100 gold immortals, thousands of heaven immortals, and tens of thousands of itinerant cultivators were killed in this battle. Their side had only lost a few thousand soldiers and hundreds of oracles. It was a very dazzling achievement. Not to mention Zhong province, even the other provinces did not have such a result. More than 100 gold immortals had been wiped out in one fell swoop. A gold immortal was not a lump of soil growing in the ground. Not someone who could be cultivated quickly like great Yu's generals. Every gold immortal was a lucky man who had gone through a long period of time that could be counted in eons. They had great perseverance, great luck, great fortune, and consumed incalculable resources to accumulate their strength bit by bit. Gold immortals were the backbone of the group of immortals, and the most important part of the immortal cultivation system. Out of 1,000 people, 300 could attain the Jin Dan. Out of 1,000 Jin Dan, about 100 could attain the nascent soul. Out of 1,000 nascent soul, about a dozen could attain the nascent divinity. Out of 1,000 nascent divinity, about 10 could attain the heaven immortal fruit. However, out of 10,000 celestial immortals, roughly one would become a golden immortal. In the entire outer heavenly realms, the ratio of gold immortals to heaven immortals was 1 to 100,000. How many celestial immortals were there? In the vast system of immortals, heaven immortals were the most ordinary commoners, and golden immortals were high and mighty nobles. Even if there were 10,000 peak stage heaven immortals, not even one of them would be able to become a golden immortal. Killing more than 100 golden immortals in a single battle, this result could only be described as glorious. According to the top-secret intelligence obtained by DU, the Myriad Immortal Alliance was an extremely large organization. However, the total number of known gold immortals in the Myriad Immortal Alliance was only about 800, which was known as the 800 Hidden Immortals of the Hidden Immortal Hall. Now more than 100 golden immortals had been killed, and 1/6 of the strength of the union of 10,000 immortals had been completely destroyed. Given the overall strength of DU, if they were to confront each other head-on, any of DU's first-grade provinces could easily cripple the Myriad Immortal Alliance with a thunderous force. But the upper-grade immortals of the Alliance rarely confronted DU's regular army head-on. So, it was really surprising that the Alliance had gathered more than 100 gold immortals and laid out a formation to ambush Bo Yenting's army. Fortunately, Wuxia was there. He easily broke the formation laid out by the gold immortals and used the power of the formation to consume their energy. Then, Bo Yenting waited patiently outside, laid out a vicious restrictive spell in advance, and wiped out more than 100 gold immortals in one fell swoop. The report of the battle was sent back to Zhongning City as fast as possible. When Bo Zhongfu received the report, he could not believe it, and sent out 18 groups of civil and military officials to verify the result of the battle. When the result of the battle was confirmed, the severed limbs of the gold immortals, their identity medallions, and other personal belongings were sent to Zhongning City. Then, Bo Zhongfu immediately sent the spoils of the battle to Liangzhu with a formation. Ever since the war between DU and Myriad Immortal Alliance began, the immortals of the Alliance had been like underground rats, jumping out here and there to bite, and then jumping out there to scream. Pango continent was vast, and the immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance could always find a weak spot in DU's army and give DU a hard blow. Over the years of war, DU's army had lost nearly 1 million soldiers, and the number of civilians killed was astronomical. The officials of DU did not even dare to report the number of casualties to the human emperor. Although DU's army was extremely powerful, in the face of an enemy that could not be found or touched, DU's army could only sweep around savagely. Countless mountain spirits and cultivation clans native to Pango continent had been wiped out, and countless itinerant immortals and cultivators who were besieged by the Great Yu army had been killed. But the core forces of Myriad Immortal Alliance, the Gold Immortals of Hidden Immortal Hall and Divine Hall, who were even stronger than Gold Immortals, had rarely suffered a real blow. This time, Bo Yenting had killed more than 100 Gold Immortals, more than 1,000 Heaven Immortals, and tens of thousands of itinerant cultivators at once. Those Heaven Immortals and itinerant cultivators could only be regarded as supplementary, but the contribution of more than 100 Gold Immortals was too great. Bo Zhongfu hurriedly asked for the credit for his son. With the power of Bo clan in Liangzhu, perhaps Bo Yenting could be made a marquis because of this contribution. 9 official documents were sent from Zhongning City in a row. Bo Zhongfu had issued a strict order for Bo Yenting to return to Zhongning City with the army. The army of 10,000 soldiers Wu Qi brought with him did not belong to Zhongning City. But as Bo Zhongfu had asked all those who had rendered meritorious service in the war to go to Zhongning City to wait for the reward, Wu Qi was glad to bring the army to Zhongning City. It was good to be rewarded, and Wu Qi could take the opportunity to go to Zhongning City to personally command the revenge against Yu Miao. Although the assassins controlled by Luo Kadi had caused a great disturbance in Yu Clan's people, it was not as satisfying as seeing the flesh and blood of Yu Miao's people being smashed to pieces just by listening to Luo Kadi's report. Following closely behind Bo Zhongfu's tent, Wu Qi and the other captains brought their soldiers, lined up their flying ships neatly into a marching formation, and set off for Zhongning City in a mighty formation. What surprised Wu Qi and the others was that Bo Zhongfu, the prefecture overseer of Zhong Province, had brought all the officials of Zhong Province 100 miles out of the city to welcome Bo Yenting's army. On top of that, Bo Zhongfu had brought all the ceremonial guards of a first-grade prefecture overseer, a huge floating cloud platform, a magnificent hall, a ceremonial gate, and a 30,000-strong guard of honor, all clad in bright armor and looking awe-inspiring. In addition to Bo Zhongfu's own guards of honor, the officials from the military court, Directorate of Celestials, Punishment Court, and many others who came with him to welcome the guests had also brought a different number of guards according to their ranks, each of them carrying different guards of honor. It was such a grand scene that even Bo Yenting, who knew he had made a great contribution and would be rewarded with great benefits, shivered with fear. The scale of the welcoming ceremony was too outrageous. After a warm welcoming ceremony, Bo Zhongfu rewarded the soldiers of Zhong Province and the 10,000 soldiers that Wu Qi had brought with him with a huge amount of wealth, fine wine, beef and mutton. In particular, the generals of Zhong Province who had participated in the battle under Bo Yenting's lead were all promoted in military ranks. Bo Zhongfu generously rewarded them with millions of acres of the most fertile land near Zhongning City, as well as the people in the villages and towns on it. The only strange thing was that Wu Qi did not receive any reward during the welcoming ceremony. Bo Zhongfu seemed to have forgotten that it was Wu Qi's efforts that had broken the formation. Wu Qi was full of doubts, but he noticed that Bo Zhongfu kept nodding and smiling at him, showing his goodwill. Therefore, Wu Qi hid among the generals without saying a word, waiting to see what Bo Zhongfu's intention was. At the welcoming ceremony, Left Minister Yu Miao naturally came out with the crowd. Obviously, the recent assassination of the juniors of Yu Clan had given Yu Miao a headache. There were 2 eye-catching bags under his eyes, and his eye sockets were dark. Obviously, he had consumed a lot of energy recently. When he saw Wu Qi, the resentment in his eyes could poison 10,000 bulls to death. If this were not the place where Bo Yenting was coming back in triumph, Wu Qi had no doubt that Yu Miao would personally kill him again. Smiling at Yu Miao, who was full of resentment, Wu Qi shrugged and followed Bo Zhongfu and Bo Yenting into Zhongning City with the other generals. As soon as he settled down in the barracks and settled the 10,000 soldiers, one of Bo Zhongfu's confidants found Wu Qi and invited him to the Zhong Province Overseer Mansion. In the side hall of the mansion, Wu Qi saw Bo Zhongfu, who was dressed in his usual robe and had a weary look on his face. Bo Yenting was not seen in the side hall. Apart from Wu Qi, Bo Zhongfu was the only person in the hall. After bowing to Bo Zhongfu, Wu Qi stood aside and quietly studied Bo Zhongfu, who was sitting cross-legged on a black jade hassock and emanating a faint cold aura. He had seen Bo Zhongfu from afar a few times, but this was the first time Wu Qi had seen him up close. This was a very graceful middle-aged man. Even the way each strand of hair on his head exuded a luxurious aura of someone born in an aristocratic family. Dignified but not overbearing. Gentle, but not easily approachable. Gentle like jade. That jade-like color had a trace of a sharp aura, causing people to not dare to have the slightest bit of disrespect towards him. A nobleman from the Diyu clan with an almost perfect bearing was indeed worthy of being the human emperor's most trusted confidant. Wu Qi bowed his head and began to ponder why Bo Zhongfu had asked him to come here. Bo Zhongfu was also studying Wu Qi, but he didn't pay too much attention to Wu Qi. He just glanced at Wu Qi with an appreciative gaze of a superior, and said directly, "General Tan Lang has made the greatest contribution in wiping out the 143 gold immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance this time." Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed, then said humbly with a smile, "It's Marshal Bo who commanded us well, and the soldiers who sacrificed their lives." Bo Zhongfu nodded and praised. Not arrogant after taking credit, very good. After pondering for a moment, Bo Zhongfu stroked his beard and said, "You have made a great contribution and logically speaking, You should be rewarded handsomely when you are presented to the human emperor. However, Yunting needs the title of a marquis. If all the credit is given to him, he will surely be conferred the title of a marquis. Bo Zhongfu raised his eyelids slightly, then looked at Wuqi and said, "Give the greatest contribution to Yunting. According to your background and current official position, the human emperor can only give you land, beauties, and money. You have no hope of getting a title of nobility. I can give you these things even in Zhong province." Wuqi understood what Bo Zhongfu meant. He smiled and cupped his fist and said, "Everything will be decided by your Excellency Prefecture Overseer. Well, if your Excellency gives me land, can you give me another piece of land near my current East Sea County? Money is necessary, but as for beauties, can you exchange them for people?" Seeing that Wuqi was so tactful, Bo Zhongfu smiled gladly. Bo Zhongfu was about to agree to Wuqi's request when he heard footsteps coming from outside. A group of people went straight into the side hall, where Bo Zhongfu was meeting guests. Bo Zhongfu couldn't help but feel annoyed. Who dared to break in when he was meeting guests? But as soon as he saw the people who came in, he hurriedly laughed and stood up to greet them. Chapter 678. Let them do whatever they want. By following King Yangqiu, they would have more opportunities to render meritorious service and get more benefits, wouldn't they? Especially for someone like King Yangqiu. He would be more generous, wouldn't he? But these 30 generals with the symbol of Rainmaster were at least as strong as 18th tier gold immortals. Wuqi did not say a word. One of them was the prefecture overseer of Zhong province, and the other was King Yangqiu. He was just a general from the military court of a small 9th grade province, and the county governor of a newly established East Sea County, with a population of less than 1 million. He was not qualified to bargain with them. Fortunately, the foundation of the formation was not stable, and the Great Yu army had come to destroy the land within 10 miles of it with violence, forcibly breaking it open and rescuing King Yangqiu. If King Yangqiu had been trapped in the formation for a few more hours, his life would have been in danger. King Yangqiu snorted softly as he took out a scroll and spread it on the ground. A hazy halo burst out of the scroll, revealing a large number of mountains and rivers. Pointing at the mountains and rivers, he told them about how King Yangqiu had been on expeditions in recent months with his army, but had run into a wall in the hands of the immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance. With a subtle smile, Wuqi turned to look at Bo Zhongfu. These warriors were all wearing black cloaks, embroidered with a rugged mountain in the middle with 2 small characters, Yangqiu, the size of mung beans, in the middle. The cloaks were made of human hair, and the edges were wrapped with human tendons as thin as a hammer. It was also an extremely powerful defensive magical artifact, and had a strong resistance to all kinds of soul magic used by immortals. Bo Zhongfu sat down on another hassock, leaned his body toward King Yangqiu with a smile, and asked, "Your Excellency, what brings you here today?" Wuqi almost burst out laughing when he saw King Yangqiu. Perhaps he was frightened by the fact that Wuqi had kidnapped King Yangqiu from Yugu's supreme tower, right under the nose of a mighty supreme oracle. So King Yangqiu was accompanied by dozens of extremely powerful warriors and oracles. Bo Zhongfu understood the meaning behind Wuqi's smile. After pondering for a moment, he told King Yangqiu about the agreement he had just reached with Wuqi. If he wanted Wuqi to give all the credit to Dog Count Yunting, Bo Zhongfu would have to give Wuqi a lot of land, money, and people. As King Yangqiu talked about his bad luck over the past few months, Bo Zhongfu blinked his eyes and kept glancing at Wuqi with a flicker in his eyes. For a moment, Wuqi felt that Bo Zhongfu was like a pervert in heat, and he was a peerless beauty who was trying to say something to him with his amorous eyes. This territory included Hai Province, as well as a large area of the neighboring Lin Province and Fang Province. In this way, the East Sea County, which spanned 3 provinces, had actually become Wuqi's private fief. From today on, all the taxes, tributes, and the like in the East Sea County would be directly responsible to Zhong Province. Bo Zhongfu nodded with a smile and said, "Your Excellency is right. Since I have attacked Myriad Immortal Alliance, I should wipe them out completely." The strength of 9th grade lieutenants, 6th grade colonels, and 3rd grade generals might vary, but only those who had reached the level of 2nd Pengu Heaven, and were strong enough to fight against gold immortals were qualified to be conferred the title of generals by divine beasts. The problem was, Bo Zhongfu was a man, so it was difficult for Wu Qi to understand the meaning behind the gleam in his eyes. Bo Zhongfu rarely winked at people, and he rarely communicated with them in this way. So even though his eyelids were sore, Wu Qi still looked at him in confusion. Then, 3 months ago, one of King Yangqiu's capable generals led an army of 30,000 to attack an itinerant cultivator clan, but accidentally stumbled into a heavenly thunder and earthly flame formation. The army was burned to ashes, and the general's internal organs were invaded by fire poison. King Yangqiu had already sent him back to Liangzhu to recuperate. But the fire poison had invaded his body, and even if he was treated well, the general's cultivation base had dropped by about 30%. It was a heavy loss. After telling him what had happened in the past few months, King Yangqiu said coolly, "Clearly, myriad immortal alliances' strength has been wiped out by Deyu's thunderous attack. They are no longer able to confront us head-on, and now they can only defend their strongholds and fight against our great Yu army with formations." King Yangqiu glanced at Bo Zhongfu and twitched the corner of his mouth into a smile. "You're right, but our biggest problem now is the various formations deployed by those immortals. I heard that General Tanlang has just broken one of them, and Bo Yenting has made a great contribution?" His face a little pale, King Yangqiu slowly nodded to Bo Zhongfu, who had come up to greet him warmly, then sat down on the black jade hassock where Bo Zhongfu had been sitting just now. Bo Zhongfu smiled and clapped his hands. A few maids came in silently and carefully placed a few hassocks on the floor in front of King Yangqiu. 9 months ago, King Yangqiu had led an army of 300,000 soldiers to attack a cave abode built at the bottom of an abyss by cultivators of Myriad Immortal Alliance, but they were defeated by a formation that looked like a windmill and could shoot out billions of wind blades when it was activated. 7 months ago, King Yangqiu had led his personal guards to hunt down a family of itinerant cultivators. Just as he was about to kill all 300 of them, 2 masters of formation from Myriad Immortal Alliance deployed a formation using the nearby mountains and rivers, which nearly trapped him inside. In addition to these 30 soldiers, who were extremely well equipped and had extremely powerful cultivation bases, King Yangqiu was accompanied by 10 oracles in black linen robes with the pattern of suns embroidered on their sleeves. The weakest of them had 3 round suns embroidered on his sleeves, while the strongest had 8 suns embroidered on his sleeves. In Deyu, the personal guards of princes like King Yangqiu had great privileges, and Wu Qi had already figured out how to use them to give Yu Mu a surprise. In the complicated military system of Deyu, the ranks above Wu Qi's lieutenant, colonel, and general were so complicated that even the senior ministers of Deyu could not distinguish them clearly. There were all kinds of powerful generals with divine beasts as their titles. The generals with the title of Divine Beast were divided into several levels according to the strength of the Divine Beast. A general at the level of Rainmaster should be in existence of the lowest level among all the Divine Beast generals. Satisfied, Wu Qi bowed respectfully to King Yangqiu and immediately became one of King Yangqiu's ordinary personal guards. Wu Qi glanced at the waists of these soldiers, and his pupils constricted. Each of the 30 soldiers had 2 jade medallions hanging from their lion belts. One was the size of a child's palm, carved with patterns of mountains, rivers and clouds, and in the middle of it were the words Yangqiu. The other was a little bigger, with a strange creature shaped like a sheep with a pair of wings on its back flying in the wind amidst the clouds that were intertwined with 9 spirit snakes. In their wide-open mouths were 2 rows of sharp teeth made of bone thorns refined with a mystic technique, which could be shot out as soon as they were activated. It would be a fatal mistake to ignore the bone thorns, which numbered more than 100 in total. Wu Qi bowed to King Yangqiu, then sat down cross-legged on a hassock with his back straight. With his hands on his knees, he naturally exuded an air of majesty. King Yangqiu looked Wu Qi up and down for a while, then nodded with satisfaction. The man who broke into the side hall of the mansion with a large group of guards was King Yangqiu, who was clad in a black cloak with only his face exposed. In addition to the land, Bo Zhongfu would also give Wu Qi enough money to build 100 new cities, and transfer tens of millions of people from the nearby provinces to Wu Qi's rule. The winged sheep was a legendary divine creature known as the Lord of Rain. a powerful creature who could summon clouds and rain, and had the power to control the weather. The shoulders, elbows, chest, knees, and other parts of the armor were all carved with ferocious and twisted ghost heads with exquisite craftsmanship. These ghost heads were not only ornaments, but they also had a direct lethal power. A thumb-sized black pearl was embedded in the pupils of each ghost head, within which a wisp of green flame could be seen faintly. These pearls were actually thunders with astonishing destructive power, which could be shot out at any time to injure the enemy. King Yongqiu snorted coldly and said in a deep voice, "I don't care why they are defending so desperately. Maybe they have reinforcements, or maybe they have other tricks up their sleeves. But we have to wipe them out as soon as possible." King Yongqiu looked at Wu Qi, who was standing in the middle of the side hall, then reached out a finger and pointed at a hassock in front of him. "Military Minister of High Province, Tan Lang? Have a seat." Without waiting for Bo Zhongfu to explain, King Yongqiu said in a deep voice, "The title of Marquis of Diyu is divided into 9 grades. According to Bo Yenting's contribution, he can only be conferred the title of Marquis of the 9th grade at most. How much effort have I saved him by promoting him to the rank of Marquis of the 3rd grade? Just let Tan Lang accompany me in the battle." The aura emanating from the 30 soldiers was as sharp as freshly unsheathed sabers. Wu Qi only took a few glances at them, but he felt as if he had been slashed in the face. The 10 oracles, on the other hand, did not give off any sense of existence. They gave off the feeling of 10 ghosts drifting into the hall after King Yongqiu, and then separated themselves to the left and right, taking control of the entire hall in a very natural manner. 10 days ago, when King Yongqiu was leading his army to attack an immortal market run by Myriad Immortal Alliance, he sneaked out of the camp in the middle of the night with a few guards. As a result, he strayed into a formation laid out by an immortal, and was struck on the back by a series of swords condensed from 360 stars. One of his defensive armors was smashed to pieces, and he nearly lost his life. King Yongqiu raised his eyebrows and nodded disapprovingly. Then he pointed his finger at the scroll on the ground, and a bright light poured out of it, revealing all the mountains and rivers in the vicinity of East Sea County. After a brief discussion, King Yongqiu drew a circle in the vicinity of East Sea County. Immediately, a land 10 times the size of the current East Sea County was drawn out and turned into the new territory of East Sea County. 30 warriors clad in black heavy armor. Every set of heavy armor was of the same standard. The pitch-black battle armor covered their entire bodies, and their helmets, which were shaped like copper bells, had 2 long curved horns. The front of the helmets was covered by a pitch-black demon mask, which made them look extremely ferocious. The armors were half an inch thick, and their surface was inlaid with a layer of dense black dragon scales, which were inscribed with complex 3-dimensional runes, giving them an above-average defense. Chapter 679. King Yongqiu's personal guards were divided into 2 types. One of them was the personal bodyguards who were responsible for his safety. These bodyguards were basically warriors whose brains were stuffed with muscles, or priests whose brains were replaced by the magic of ghosts and gods. They did not have any skills other than killing and arson, or acting as human shields when necessary. The second type was the various strange talents that King Yongqiu had painstakingly gathered, such as those who specialized in managing his taxes and revenues, training his hounds and falcons, and training his personal guards, as well as people like Wu Qi, who could give him advice in government and military affairs. Bo Zhongfu eagerly escorted King Yongqiu and his company to the gate with all the officials of the prefecture overseer's mansion. When King Yongqiu boarded the chariot, Bo Zhongfu held Wu Qi's hand and said some warm words to him, trying to build a closer relationship with Wu Qi. He lowered his voice and told Wu Qi that as long as Wu Qi needed his help in East Sea County, just let him know. Wu Qi accepted Bo Zhongfu's kindness without hesitation. His identity was different now. As King Yongqiu's personal guard, he was in fact King Yongqiu's retainer. His subordinate was no longer in Zhong Province, but directly under King Yongqiu. Although Bo Zhongfu was the prefecture overseer of Zhong Province and a close confidant of the current human emperor, King Yongqiu was a member of the imperial clan, the King of Diyu. In terms of bloodline and tradition, Bo Zhongfu could not compare with King Yongqiu at all, now that he had become King Yongqiu's personal guard, and a personal guard who specialized in military affairs. With King Yongqiu's status, as long as Wuqi made a little contribution in the future, it would be a piece of cake for him to be promoted. If Bo Zhongfu could build a good relationship with Wuqi now, it would be extremely convenient for Bo Zhongfu and his clan in the future. It was just a few warm words, so there was nothing to be embarrassed about. After sending King Yongqiu to the chariot, Bo Zhongfu stood at the gate and watched as King Yongqiu and his company stepped into the teleportation formation and disappeared in a beam of bright light. King Yongqiu and his bodyguards returned to his barracks through the teleportation formation, but Wuqi stayed in Zhongning City. He would lead his army to meet King Yongqiu's army at dawn. Although King Yongqiu came and went quickly, Wuqi's identity medallion, military medallion, official documents, and even the uniforms of King Yongqiu's personal guards were all distributed to him in the prefecture overseer's mansion. From these details, it could be seen that King Yongqiu was full of confidence in his every move. He was confident that Wuqi would not refuse his invitation, and he was confident that Bo Zhongfu would not give Wuqi to him. Therefore, he had prepared everything in advance. Even the identity medallion that was given to Wuqi was engraved with the name Tan Lang. All the official documents were properly prepared, and even the armor and cloak that were given to Wuqi were a perfect fit. King Yongqiu, who was extremely confident, tough and direct in his approach, lofty and even a little domineering, standing at the end of the street and watching King Yongqiu's chariot disappear in the bright light, Wuqi could not help but smile. Working for King Yongqiu was obviously much better than staying in Zhong province. If King Yongqiu's personality was put to good use, it would be of great help to Wuqi. With a faint smile, Wuqi cupped his fist and bowed to Bo Zhongfu, who was standing at the entrance of the mansion. Then he hurried out of the city with his guards, preparing to assemble the army and arrange the logistics, and then meet King Yongqiu at the place where he was stationed. King Yongqiu was now leading an army to wipe out the strongholds of Myriad Immortal Alliance in Mingu Province, a first-grade province near Zhong Province. It would take him half a month to travel from Zhong Province to Mingu Province at the fastest speed of a flying ship. Therefore, Wuqi had to arrange the march and deployment of the army along the way. After a busy night, the army of 10,000 soldiers from East Sea Province, who had just set up camp in the military camp in Zhongning City, was ready to set off. With Bo Yunting's favor, the military court of Zhong Province had replenished Wuqi's army of 10,000 with enough armaments for 50,000 soldiers, and even made an exception for Wuqi with several powerful war machines, such as giant crossbows. Even the current clan master of the Yu clan in Zhong Province, Yu Mu, had received the news, and had sent hundreds of oracles to serve under Wuqi. With the help of the hundreds of oracles, Wuqi had no choice but to visit Yu Mu in person to express his gratitude. He knew that it was an investment from Yu Mu, but it was still a favor after all. The fact that Wuqi could have hundreds of oracles accompanying his army of 10,000 soldiers was enough to make other military officers envious. When everything was ready, Wuqi handed a map scroll to Huang Liang. The map scroll was also a small magical artifact, and it recorded the route from Zhong Province to Mingu Province to meet up with King Yongqiu's army. With it, Huang Liang could lead the army to Mingu Province and join King Yongqiu's army. After all, Wuqi's army did not have any military affairs to attend to at the moment, and it was just a normal deployment. The cost of using teleportation formations to get to Mingu Province was too high, so it was better for them to travel by themselves. In particular, it was extremely costly to use teleportation formations to transport large flying ships and other things that came with the army. So, there was no need for Wuqi's army of 10,000 soldiers to use too many resources. But Wuqi was different. He was King Yongqiu's personal guard, and he had been given one night to organize the army. He had to rush to King Yongqiu's side as soon as possible and give him military affairs, which could not be delayed at all. Therefore, he had to use teleportation formations to get to King Yongqiu's side. After explaining everything and watching the flying ships led by Huang Liang take off in the direction of Mingu Province, Wuqi changed out of his armor and cloak, put on the unique uniform of King Yongqiu's personal guard, and hurried into Zhongning City with more than 100 personal guards, heading for the square in front of the prefecture overseer mansion. Because of the series of wars, Zhong province had entered a period of war preparation. The streets were empty, with few residents walking around, and more heavily armed patrols were patrolling the streets. The crisp sound of clappers could be heard coming from the watchtowers around the city. It was the signal for the sentries to change shifts and for the soldiers to have their breakfast. The wheels of a few convoys rattled as they made their way down the street. The vehicles were loaded with a large number of metal ingots and some glinting bones. These were the materials for the military court to forge ordnance, and the raw materials for the Directorate of Celestials to craft bone talismans. The shops and restaurants along the streets were all open, but there were not many customers. Inside the empty houses, all the managers and waiters of the shops and restaurants were sitting on the long benches in a daze, staring blankly at Wuxia and his company who were walking through the street at top speed like a pair of withered white geese. Wuxia could not help but shake his head. If the war between Diyu and Myriad Immortal Alliance continued, so what if the alliance was wiped out? Diyu's loss was not worth the gain, and the losses and blows they had suffered could not be made up for in 3 to 5 years. To get to the square in front of the Zhong province overseer mansion, they had to pass through Yu clan's mansion. But today, coincidentally, when Wuxia and his company passed through the front gate, Yu Miao's son, Yu Lei, the man who had gone to East Sea County to seize Wuqia's property, happened to come out of the gate with a group of guards. Yu Lei was taken aback when he saw Wuxia walk past in a majestic black armor with a ghost's head. Suddenly he spat on the ground. Pointing a finger at Wuxia, he sneered and said, "Look, this is the wild dog that can't be tamed properly. He only got the position of the county governor of East Sea County because he clung to Yu Miao's thigh, and now he has climbed to a higher position? Hee Tanlang, you are the dog of Yu clan." Wuxia flew into a rage and stopped abruptly. Yu Lei stood at the front gate, pointing a finger at Wuxia and laughing sarcastically. Gradually, Yu Lei's words became more and more unpleasant, and he even described Wuxia as Yu Miao's boy toy, saying that he had tricked Yu Miao into giving him the territory of East Sea County by sleeping with Yu Miao. In the end, Yu Lei burst out laughing without caring about the consequences and said, "This boy has fawned on King Yongqiu this time. I wonder how many times he has been fucked by someone. And how did he become King Yongqiu's personal guard? A personal guard." The group of guards who followed Yu Lei threw their heads back and roared with laughter, and Yu Lei laughed loudly as well. His solemn, square-shaped face became extremely twisted and ferocious at this moment. Many of Wuqia's personal guards took a few steps forward at the same time, trying to distinguish themselves from Yu Lei. The personal guards around Wuxia were all carefully selected burly men who were born and raised in East Sea County. These simple and honest men did not know any great principles. But since Wuxia had educated them with kindness and given money to their families, these stubborn men only knew one thing: Wuxia was their master. If they did not react when their master was insulted like this, how could they still be human? But when Wuxia scolded the guards, who were half unsheathed, they all took a few steps back reluctantly. With a smile on his face, Wuxia walked up to Yu Lei, cupped his fist, and bowed gently to him. "Your Excellency Yu Lei, we don't have such a deep hatred, do we?" Yu Lei gave Wuxia a sideways glance, arrogantly sneered and said, "You know very well in your heart. Let's just wait and see. For someone like you who is like a pig or a dog, as long as my father is free, you will be turned into ashes sooner or later." Blood splashed in all directions, and the sound of bones breaking and flesh breaking shocked Yu Lei's personal guards. In front of so many servants and gatekeepers in front of Yu clan's entrance, and so many personal guards, Wuxia, who was still smiling a moment ago, suddenly rose and punched through Yu Lei's chest, digging out his violently beating heart. Wuxia gave a strange laugh, tore open Yu Lei's jaw, shoved his heart into his mouth, and then smashed half of his head with his fist. A shrill ghost howl burst out from Wuqia's palm, and a few wisps of dark smoke sprayed out, wrapping Yu Lei's soul tightly. Then, a wisp of green flame sprayed out. Yu Lei's soul let out a miserable howl, and in just a blink of an eye, it was burned into ashes. Murder on the street. Murder on the street in the center of Zhongning City. Murder on the street in front of the Yu clan, the ruler of Zhong Province's Directorate of Celestials. The victim was Yu Lei, the biological son of Yu Miao, the great elder of Yu clan. Silence reigned in the surroundings, as if even the wind between the heaven and earth had stopped moving. The only sound that could be heard was the blood dripping down from Wuqi's fingertips, producing a soft dripping sound. A shrill howl soared into the sky from inside Yu Clan's mansion, as Yu Miao, shrouded in a towering ghost aura, rushed out. Tanlang, you little punk, pay with your life. Yu Miao's body flickered as he leaped several miles into the air, thrusting his palm down toward Wuqi. Chapter 680. Leaping up into the air, Yu Ke exerted almost all the strength he had in his previous life, throwing a palm strike at Wuqi with all his might. Although he did not have the time to borrow the power of the ghost deity, with the energy he had accumulated over the years of associating with the ghost deity, the palm strike was as strong as an 18th-tier gold immortal. Accompanied by a shrill ghost howl, a black palm several tens of feet in circumference plunged down from the sky. Vaguely, one could see the shadows of runes flashing in the palm. It was the ghost warding seal, which Yuzong had obtained from the ghosts and deities of the outer domain after a cruel blood sacrifice. The palm strike could turn a living person into a ghost, and the ghost controlling seal could immediately imprison the soul of the killer, turning him into a ghost servant under Yu Miao's control. Yu Miao stared at Wuqi with eyes full of fire. He was determined to imprison Wuqi's soul in the boundless Yin flame and torture him day and night, immersing him in endless pain for all eternity. For some reason, when Yu Miao saw Wuqi for the first time, he felt uncomfortable all over, and wished he could slap Wuqi to death. In the end, Wuqi had brought him great trouble. He could not believe that he had helped that good-for-nothing Yu Miao seize the power of High Province. In Yu Miao's mind, the power of High Province was supposed to be given to his beloved grandson, but in the end it was Yu Miao. Not only that, during the fight for the power of High Province, Wuqi had humiliated Yu Miao to such an extent. Yu Miao had failed to kill Wuqi with 3 palm strikes in a row, which had become the joke of the whole Yu clan. After that, Yu Miao's disciple and son tried to retaliate against Wuqi, but in the end, both of them were killed by Yu Huai's powerful counterattack. How could Yu Miao not feel heartache when he went for wool and came home shorn? Not only were his son and disciple killed, but the assassin he sent to assassinate Wuqi, who was seriously wounded and bedridden, failed to kill him. Even when Wuqi was brainwashed by the evil spirit Zither, the assassin failed to kill Wuqi. Yu Lei, who was sent to take over the power of the East Sea County, returned to Zhongning City with a dejected face. Yu Lei had been humiliated, but the cruel revenge that followed had cost him a great number of his people. Dozens of his grandsons and granddaughters were killed, and the heartache almost made him faint. After that, the properties of many elders in his lineage were hit like a storm. Many shops were burned and looted, and the losses were so heavy that he almost went bankrupt. Even without the art of divination, Yu Miao knew that all this was related to Wuqi, and he was definitely involved in it. Yu Miao thought that he was a successful man, and he had a good interpersonal relationship. Apart from Wuqi, no one had such a grudge against him. Last night, when he heard that Wuqi had been recruited by King Yongqiu as his personal guard, and that Yu Miao had sent hundreds of oracles from the Directorate of Celestials to Wuqi early in the morning, Yu Miao's resentment grew even stronger. After getting up early in the morning with a belly full of anger, Yu Miao was discussing with a few of his closest confidants how to retaliate against Wuqi. Suddenly, his heart beat violently. His favorite son, Yu Lei, was killed right in front of Yu clan's gate. As father and son were connected by blood, Yu Miao's blood and energy swelled at that moment, and the sudden heartache nearly made him faint. Looking at Wuqi, whose hand was still stained with the blood of his beloved son, Yu Miao roared furiously and threw a palm strike at Wuqi with all his strength. I don't care whose personal guard you are, whether you are a promising young man whom Yu Miao has tried his best to bribe, whether you have just sold a great favor to Bo Zhongfu, I'll kill you. I must kill you. Hovering in midair, Yu Miao let out a strange laugh. After the palm strike, he immediately performed an incantation gesture with both hands and muttered an incantation under his breath, preparing to use the power of the ghost god to burn Wuqi to ashes. Looking at the vicious palm strike coming down from above, Wuqi laughed and said, "You have a quick reaction. After all, father and son are cultivating their minds. Wuxia knew very well how powerful the oracles of the Directorate of Celestials were, and he also knew their limitations. When they borrowed the power of the Ghost God, they were qualified to fight against the primordial immortals of the Celestial Court. But when they did not borrow the power of the Ghost God, their overall strength was nothing more than ordinary. When Yu Miao borrowed the power of the Ghost God, his overall strength was close to that of a peak-level gold immortal. But now, the palm strike he threw out in a hurry was nothing more than the overall strength of an 18th-tier gold immortal. A mere 18th-tier gold immortal? Wuqi's current cultivation base had crossed that threshold. Whether it was his fleshly body, magic power, or divine abilities, he was already half a step into the realm of gold immortals. And that was not all. After being tempered by 300 guardian heavenly dragons in Ming Li's Buddhist kingdom, Wuqi's fleshly body was now strong enough to fight against a body cultivator of the realm of gold immortal. His current fleshly body was truly as strong as a gold immortal's. He threw his head back and let out a long roar. Purple mist rose from his body, and a great plume of ghostly gray mist sprayed out of it. Wuqi sprung up into the sky, opened his mouth, and swallowed the palm strike. The interstitial world vibrated violently, and a large amount of chaotic energy soared into the sky, wrapping the grayish palm print in the boundless chaotic energy, and gradually weakening it. This was the benefit of forming an interstitial world. Although Wuqi could withstand the palm strike with his fleshly body, he was bound to be injured. But by absorbing and digesting the palm strike with his interstitial world, Wuqi had a much easier time fighting against the power of one man with the power of a small world. Amidst Yu Miao's horrified gaze, he swallowed Yu Miao's attack in one gulp. Suddenly, dozens of figures who looked exactly like Wuqi appeared amidst the ghostly energy around Wuqi. Some of them were laughing loudly, some were wailing madly, some were rolling on the ground, and some were hacking and slashing at each other with sharp blades in their hands. With that, Wuqi's true form had blended into the mass of ghostly shadows, and no one could capture his figure anymore. In the mansion, at least 50 moon oracles produced powerful bone talismans at the same time. All kinds of attacks such as thunderbolts, flames, blades, ice and wind, soared into the sky and pounced at Wuqi. The shadows in the ghostly energy were shattered, but no matter how many they destroyed, 2 or more shadows would appear for every shadow they destroyed, and they could not be completely wiped out. Wuqi gave a sinister laugh as he unleashed a vast sheet of Shen energy to envelop the entire mansion. Countless shadows emerged one after another, preventing the oracles from attacking him accurately. Meanwhile, his true form rushed in front of Yu Miao and punched him in the face. Wuqi had used all his strength in the punch, and Yu Miao, who was caught off guard, howled miserably and was knocked flying away. However, Yu Miao had a few defensive spirit items with him. As soon as Wuqi's punch shattered his nose, a spirit talisman leaped onto his head and transformed into a hazy robe that wrapped him up. 90% of the force of Wuqi's punch was instantly absorbed by the robe, and Yu Miao was not fatally wounded. This was the gap between the defensive magical treasures of Oracle de Yu and the immortal items of immortals. Although the defensive magical treasures of Oracle de Yu were as powerful as immortal items, there was always a delay when they were activated, especially those bone talismans that could automatically protect their owners. Therefore, Oracle de Yu had to prepare all the magical treasures in advance before fighting the immortals. Otherwise, he would be in danger of losing his life if he was careless. Yu Miao had come out in a hurry, and his mind was filled with thoughts of revenge for his son. How could he have the time to activate his magical treasures? With great difficulty, a bone talisman that automatically protected Yu Miao's face, preventing him from being disfigured by Wuqi. But Wuqi's attacks came one after another. Punches, kicks, headbutt, elbows, and wisps of ghostly flames soared into the sky, transforming into ghostly claws that scratched and gnawed at Yu Miao. Amidst Wuqi's deep and powerful incantation, all kinds of vicious curses and spells fell on Yu Miao like raindrops, putting him in a very difficult situation. For a moment, Yu Miao's eyes were bloodshot. Wuqi's ghost eyes curse was trying to devour his eyes. For a moment, Yu Miao felt a sharp pain in his lower body. Wuqi's yang breaking curse was corroding his yang. For a moment, Yu Miao's internal organs were numb and sore, and Wuqi's internal rotting curse was corroding his internal organs. All kinds of vicious curses kept raining down. Fortunately, Yu Miao was, after all, an old oracle who had dabbled in all kinds of curses. Amidst Wu Qi's storm-like attacks, Yu Miao hastily blocked Wu Qi's punches and kicks. At the same time, he kept reciting incantations to ward off Wu Qi's curses. The few magical items he wore, such as jade pendants, jade bracelets, and jade rings, were glowing faintly, weakening Wu Qi's attacks. Seeing that Yu Miao was about to turn the tables with his experience, Wu Qi became anxious. "Come out, Lei Meng. I have something good for you," he cried out. A huge spatial rift that ordinary people could not perceive suddenly appeared over the Yu clan's mansion, and Lei Meng's projection descended at the fastest speed. Lei Meng's lips were moving rapidly, as if he was chewing something. At the same time, he kept burping. Obviously, he had not finished digesting the blood sacrifice on Myriad Immortal's planet. What is it? There is something good again? You are a quick and efficient boy, and I like it." Lei Meng burst into laughter as soon as he appeared. For a moment, Yu Miao's face was as pale as a sheet of paper, and he looked no different from a ghost. Looking at Lei Meng looming in the sky in horror, he screamed at the top of his lungs, "Gui Shao! Save me, Your Excellency Gui Shao! I'll definitely prepare a large amount of blood sacrifice for you." While Yu Miao was reciting incantations and howling, Wu Qi had already finished the exchange with Lei Meng as fast as he could, then pointed a finger at Yu Miao. Lei Meng sneered and slapped his palm down. Bolts of lightning coiled around the palm like countless furious dragons twisting and roaring. Seeing that Lei Meng was about to kill Yu Miao, who was screaming and screaming, finally persuaded Gui Shao, the ancestor god he worshipped, to save him by offering a large amount of blood sacrifice. A bony arm with ragged skin and flesh stretched out of the void next to Yu Miao and collided with Lei Meng's hand with brute force. A deafening boom rang out, and dozens of palaces in Yu clan's mansion collapsed. Lei Meng gave a furious roar as he grabbed the giant hand and followed it into the spatial tunnel. Obviously, he had failed to kill Yu Miao, so he had gone straight to Gui Shao to kill him. Yu Miao, on the other hand, howled miserably. Although the two ghosts and deities did not kill him, all the magical items he carried, such as jade pendants, were shattered, and the huge shockwaves severely wounded his frail body. A beam of black light shot out of Wu Qi's collar. Ao Buzan opened his mouth and bit down on Yu Miao's body, ripping off both of his legs with a loud crunch. Wu Qi gave a cold snort. Just as he was about to rush forward and kill Yu Miao, a beam of dark light suddenly approached him from the side. Yu Miao stopped in front of Wu Qi, looking at Wu Qi with a faint smile on his face as he nodded and said, "General Tan Lang, for my sake, please spare the Grand Elder of Yu Clan." Wu Qi was taken aback, and his clenched fist could no longer punch down. Chapter 681. Yu Miao fell heavily to the ground. Both of his legs were bitten off by Ao Buzan, but there was not even a drop of blood on the wound. Only a sticky, pale green liquid was slowly oozing out. This was the result of years of dealing with ghosts, deities, and other otherworldly beings. Yu Miao did not have much blood essence left in his body, and he relied entirely on this blood-like liquid, which was a mixture of ghost energy, magic power, and the aura of living beings to sustain his life. Had it not been for all kinds of rare spirit herbs, he would have exhausted his lifespan and returned to transmigration when the first wisp of this liquid, which was called ghost blood, appeared in his body. But as the great elder of the Yu clan in Zhong province, he had access to a lot of resources, and he could constantly consume all kinds of rare natural treasures to prolong his lifespan. That was why he was able to live to this day. Hiding in Wu Qi's collar, Ao Buzan munched contentedly on both of Yu Miao's legs. As he had been taking a lot of spirit herbs to sustain his life, his body had accumulated a lot of undigested medicinal strength. After all, he was not an immortal, and there was still a lot of medicinal strength left in his body after the spirit herbs had prolonged his lifespan. The two legs Ao Buzan had bitten off contained an amazing medicinal strength. If digested, it would undoubtedly be equivalent to the medicinal strength of several gold immortal pills concocted by gold immortals, which would be of great benefit to Ao Buzan. In front of all the members of the Yu clan, Wu Qi stomped heavily on the seriously wounded Yu Miao's face. Wu Qi was clad in the ghost head heavy armor specially equipped by King Yangqiu's personal guards, and his boots were a set of metal boots that were fused with the greaves. The heavy soles were forged with countless layers of flexible metal sheets, and the 1-inch thick metal soles had been refined with a mystic technique, making them as soft as the soles of ox tendons. But their defensive strength was not to be underestimated. The soles of the heavy metal boots were densely covered with sharp teeth that looked like wolf fangs. When Wu Qi stomped on Yu Miao's face, the teeth sank deep into his cheek. Drops of ghost blood kept oozing out of his face, but he did not even make a sound. With a strange sneer on his face, Yu Mu fixed his eyes on Yu Miao, who was standing next to him, gasping for breath with his mouth open. Yu Mu glanced at Wu Qi with a strange smile that he could not explain, then cupped his fist and bowed solemnly to Wu Qi. "General Tanlang, it's my fault this time. Yu Lei's words just now were very disrespectful to King Yangqiu. General Tanlang, please cover it up for us." When Yu Lei insulted and attacked Wu Qi just now, he had implicated King Yangqiu. It could be a big or a small matter, and it was easy to turn it into a small one. As long as no one told King Yangqiu about it, the world would be at peace, and no one would take it seriously. But if someone told King Yangqiu about it, and someone like Wu Qi added fuel to the story, King Yangqiu would have to chop off thousands of heads to appease his anger for such a disrespectful act to the king of the imperial clan. By pointing out that it was Yu Lei's fault, and intentionally or unintentionally pointed out that it was disrespectful to King Yangqiu, Yu Mu had shut the mouths of many elders and members of Yu clan, so that they could no longer defend Yu Lei. Wu Qi bowed respectfully to Yu Mu and said with a smile, "Why do you say that, Your Excellency Yu Mu? What does the words and deeds of Yu clan have to do with the words and deeds of a lunatic like Yu Lei? The culprit has been killed by me on the spot. Let's just forget about it, shall we?" Yu Mu was very satisfied with Wu Qi's attitude. Although Wu Qi had established a relationship with King Yangqiu, he was still so respectful to him, which made him feel very comfortable. He gave Wu Qi an appreciative look, then nodded with a smile, indicating that he would let go of the matter of Yu Lei's disrespect to King Yangqiu. They exchanged a glance tacitly, and then Wu Qi tightened his face and stamped hard on Yu Mu's head, making the severely wounded Yu Mu's skull creak. Fortunately, Yu Mu had been in contact with ghosts and deities for many years, and as a result, his muscles and bones had been nourished by the aura of ghosts and deities, and improved to a certain extent. As a result, his fleshly body was comparable to an ordinary mid-tier heaven immortal, who had tempered his body. Therefore, although Wu Qi's foot was strong, it did not break his head. But it was, after all, a great humiliation to be stepped on by someone, especially for someone like Yu Mu. It was a stain that could never be washed away for the rest of his life. Yu Mu rolled his eyes and fixed them on Wu Qi. His eyes were cold and gloomy, and there was no change of emotion in them. But Wu Qi knew that Yu Mu's hatred for him had reached its peak, and it was now a battle of life and death. But they were in Zhongning City, right in front of Yu clan's mansion. How could he kill Yu Mu here? If Wu Qi were a noble of Diyu, and if he had a title of nobility, given what had happened today, Yu Lei's provocation, and then Yu Mu's retaliation, it would be justifiable for him to kill Yu Mu and Yu Lei. At most, he would be punished with a demotion of his title of nobility. But, although Wu Qi had a military rank now, he was just a commoner, and he had no right to kill Yu Mu. He could kill Yu Lei because he deserved to die for insulting King Yangqiu. But, even if Wu Qi had the ability to kill a man like Yu Mu, he could not do it in public. Otherwise, Wu Qi would be provoking all the powerful clans in the system of Diyu's Directorate of Celestials, as well as all the nobles of Diyu. If that happened, even King Yangqiu would not be able to protect Wu Qi. Therefore, Wu Qi could not kill Yu Mu, and he could only assassinate him from behind, not let Wu Qi kill him in public. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi rubbed Yu Miao's face with his boot, grinding the flesh to a pulp. "The matter of Yu Lei is over," he said solemnly. "But I can't believe Your Excellency Yu Miao attacked me. Heh, does the left minister of Zhong Province Yu Mu have no respect for me?" Yu Mu smiled faintly, then nodded and said, "Yu Mu was indeed rude. General Tanlang is now King Yangqiu's personal guard, and a great talent whom King Yangqiu has personally recruited to assist in military affairs. Yumu brazenly attacked and killed General Tanlang, and Yumu is to blame for it. General Tanlang has seriously wounded Yumu with a counterattack, and we, the Yu clan, have no objection. On behalf of the entire Yu clan, Yumu had made the decision. As the current clan leader of the Yu clan in Zhong province, his words were tantamount to Yumu being beaten up for nothing, and his legs being bitten off by Ao Buzan for nothing. With Yumu's guarantee, the people of the Yu clan could never openly retaliate against Wuxia. As for Yumu sending someone to assassinate him from behind, wasn't Yumu and Wuxia sending someone to assassinate each other? It was inevitable, so there was no need to mention it. Wuxia smiled grimly, and gave Yumu's head another hard kick. You can escape death, but you can't escape punishment. Wuxia said in a deep voice, His Excellency Yumu suddenly tried to kill me, and I can bear it. After all, even if that unfilial son of his is a troublemaker, it is inevitable that he will do something irrational out of anger. But Elder Yumu, aren't you being disrespectful to King Yangqiu by acting so recklessly? More and more people of the Yu clan were gathering around, and some of their private armies had sealed off the streets. All the nearby mansions were the residences of the important ministers of Zhong province, and all of them had their doors tightly shut. But countless people were looking at them from the top of the walls and tall buildings, pointing and whispering among themselves. Yumu glanced at the onlookers, then rubbed his palms together. A plume of gray smoke rose from the ground and enveloped the entire street. After ordering the other members of the Yu clan to retreat hundreds of feet, he came to Wuqia's side and cast a soundproof barrier to shroud himself, Wuxia, and Yumu. Looking at Yumu, who was being kicked to the ground by Wuxia, Yumu suddenly smiled happily and said, You're in the right here, so you can ask for anything. Well, as long as it doesn't hurt the foundation of the Yu clan. As the current clan leader of the Yu clan, I can agree to any request. They looked at each other and smiled tacitly. Then Wuxia said in a deep voice with a straight face, It's easy to solve this problem. His Excellency Yumu has committed such atrocities, and he has lost his dignity and dignity. Why don't we ask him to step down from the post of Left Minister of the Directorate of Celestials? Yumu agreed to Wuqia's first condition. Taking advantage of Yumu's broken legs, and the fact that he had committed such atrocities, to kick Yumu out of the Directorate of Celestials was something he had failed to achieve after years of hard work. So why not? Once Yumu stepped down, he could immediately promote his closest confidant to take over the post of Left Minister of the Directorate of Celestials in Zhong province. With that, the entire power of the Directorate of Celestials in Zhong province would fall into his hands. Yumu trembled with anger. He gritted his teeth and growled. But how could he have the strength to resist when Lei Meng and Gui Xiao collided head-on with him just now, and the aftermath had seriously wounded him? Wuqia's brute force was so strong that he could not move even a little bit when he stamped his foot on Yumu's head. Yumu insulted His Excellency in the street, and His Excellency is magnanimous enough to let it go. But what about the fee for covering up his shame? Wuxia rubbed his fingers. This was the first time the term fee for covering up his shame had appeared on Pangu continent. There was no doubt that Wuxia had made a great contribution to the construction of spiritual civilization in the Yu dynasty. Fee for covering up his shame? Yumu and Yumu were stunned at the same time. And the compensation for mental damage? Wuxia had once again added bricks and tiles to the construction of spiritual civilization in the Yu dynasty. Yumu was a smart man, but if he was not, he could not have become the Grand Oracle of the Directorate of Celestials, and the current clan leader of the Yu clan in Zhong province. Yumu gave Wuxia a thoughtful look and said in a deep voice, Yumu has insulted His Excellency, and His Excellency's reputation has been tarnished. Yu Lei has been killed by you in the street, but as for His Excellency's reputation, we can only make up for it with some gold, silver, and jewelry. Wuxia looked at Yumu, and Yumu looked at Wuxia. After looking at each other for a while, they looked down at Yumu at the same time. His Excellency Yumu should be very rich, Wuxia said in a deep voice. Yumu nodded and smiled. His Excellency Yumu should be very rich. Yumu nodded with a smile and said, That's true. Whose son caused the trouble, he should bear all the responsibility himself. After dispelling the soundproof restrictive spell, and dispersing the thick gray fog, Yumu summoned all the elders of Yu clan at the entrance of his house, and told them about Wu Qi's request. He cautiously warned the elders that if they did not meet Wu Qi's request, Wu Qi would definitely complain to King Yangqiu, and at that time, Yumu was likely to be severely punished by King Yangqiu. A quarter of an hour later, the elders of Yumu's branch emptied more than half of their storehouse and fulfilled Wu Qi's blackmail request. With a big smile on his face, Yumu took Wu Qi's hand and personally sent him into the teleportation formation. Wu Qi walked into the formation with a pair of sleeves and bowed to Yumu, then took his leave with a smile on his face. He had killed his son, wounded his father, and seized his property. Wu Qi suddenly breathed a deep sigh. Chapter 682. Indiyu Province. Mingu Province was a first-grade province with the same status as Zhong Province. It was also the largest province with the strangest topography near Zhong Province. Apart from a few plains and mountains, more than 95% of the land in this vast province was filled with sunken valleys. From the east to the west, from the south to the north, countless low-lying valleys that looked like the sulci of the human brain could be found everywhere in Mingu State. The largest of them, Min Valley, occupied 30% of the land in Mingu Province. It covered a huge area, and its deepest known depth was 700,000 miles below sea level. Even the supreme oracles of Deyu were not interested in exploring the deeper and more dangerous valleys. Legend had it that Min Valley was formed from the navel of the great Saint Pangu, who had incarnated Pangu continent. There was no such thing as the deepest valley in Min Valley. As long as you looked for it, you would find a valley that was deeper than the previous one. The capital city of Mingu Province, Green Valley City, was located at the edge of Min Valley, in a huge valley less than 100 miles deep. Green Valley City was a vast expanse of fertile and mature farmland, with abundant sunshine and dense water vapor, which made it extremely rich in natural resources. Mingu Province was not only rich in all kinds of spirit herbs that liked the shade, but also the largest producer of all kinds of spirit items on Pangu continent, such as chalcedony and milk of spirit stone. Naturally, the Union of 10,000 Immortals had many strongholds here. There were too many deep valleys, too many hiding places, and an abundance of all kinds of natural treasures that were helpful to immortal cultivators. Even the output of demon beasts and demon spirits was 100 times that of other provinces in Deyu. Therefore, many immortals and itinerant cultivators of Myriad Immortal Alliance were scrambling to open up cave abodes in Mingu Province. As for the other itinerant cultivator clans that did not belong to Myriad Immortal Alliance, no one knew how many of them had settled down here. When Wu Qi walked out of the teleportation formation in the center of Green Valley City, a few black-robed heralds were already waiting for him. After verifying Wu Qi's identity medallion, seal, and other items, a few military officers brought Wu Qi into a coach that was pulled by a three-headed blue lion. The oracle who controlled the chariot gave a soft cry. A thin layer of cloud rose from under the chariot, lifting the chariot and the guards brought by Wu Qi hundreds of feet into the air as they sped out of the city. Only on the chariot did Wu Qi have a chance to take a closer look at Green Valley City. The layout and even the shape of the other cities in Great Yu were exactly the same. The prefecture overseer mansion was right in the center of the city, the military court and the directorate of celestials were on the left and right, and the punishment court was in a corner of the city, next to a dungeon built underground. Basically, anyone who had been to any first-grade province of Deyu would not get lost in Green Valley City, because all the halls and toilets were in the same position, and even the size of the toilets remained the same. The only difference between Green Valley City and Zhongning City was that, because of the different geological structure, the rocks around Green Valley City had a slight tinge of green, which made the whole city look greener and livelier than Zhongning City, which was covered with dark clouds. After flying for hundreds of miles, Wu Qi came to a flat grassland, and saw a cloud platform hovering 1,000 feet above the ground. On top of it were large tents, ceremonial gates, barracks, and soldiers performing drills. Compared to Bo Yunting's cloud platform, this one was several times larger, and in the middle of it was a small hall with 3 entrances. This was King Yangqiu's field headquarters. Below the cloud platform was a neatly arranged barracks. At a glance, Wuxia could see more than 20,000 black tents. According to the system of Du army, each tent was occupied by 10 soldiers, which meant that there were at least 200,000 soldiers here. High up in the clouds, hundreds of huge flying boats were cruising and patrolling in the air. Occasionally, oracles from the Directorate of Celestials would fly past on clouds, and from time to time, ghostly figures could be seen flickering in the dark clouds. What surprised Wuxia even more was that, from time to time, there would be a few faint beams of light that shone down from the sky, covering an area of 100 miles in circumference. When he was shrouded by these beams of light, he felt his body tighten, and vaguely, tiny electric arcs burst out from his body. It was a divine ability similar to the void glimpsing grand magic of immortal magic. Wherever the beams of light passed, there would be magical treasures that could break the invisibility spells of immortal magic, and it was a very good way to prevent enemy scouts from sneaking into the camp to spy on the army. If someone were to use a divine ability to spy on the camp, the beams of light could also give an early warning, allowing the oracles to react at any time. It was a very good divine ability, but no one in the army under Bo Yenting's command knew how to use it. Perhaps it was a restrictive spell that was only activated by some powerful magical artifact. But whatever the case, it proved that King Yangqiu's army was much better treated than the army of Zhong province. Wuxia looked up at the sky. There were only 3 flying ships in the entire Zhong province, and he saw 12 of them. In terms of wealth, the armaments for King Yangqiu's army of 200,000 soldiers were equivalent to the total of all the armies in 4 Zhong province. Led by a few military officers, Wuxia stepped onto the cloud platform of King Yangqiu's field headquarters. His guards were led to a nearby camp to rest, and after a strict identification, Wuxia finally entered the great hall in the center of the cloud platform and saw King Yangqiu, who was discussing the battle plan with his aides. Whether it was to use Great Hall or his tent, they both liked to compress the void with a divine ability similar to the interstitial space. From the outside, King Yangqiu's Great Hall was no more than hundreds of feet in length and width, and only tens of feet in height. But as soon as he entered, Wuxia found that it was more than 10 miles long, about 7 miles deep, and about a mile high. There were no pillars in the Great Hall, and the empty space gave people a great psychological pressure. On both sides of the Great Hall, several hundred longbowmen clad in rock armors were seen standing with their backs pressed against the walls. Their eyes flickered with a golden gleam as they blinked, and the powerful aura emanating from them made Wuxia feel a tightness in his chest. These longbowmen were very powerful warriors, and Wuxia even suspected that their cultivation bases had broken through the realm of gold immortals. The ostentation of a king of Great Yu was indeed different from that of a local official. There were no more than 100 generals under Bo Yenting who were strong enough to fight against gold immortals, but the hundreds of longbowmen whom King Yangqiu used as guards of honor were all as strong as gold immortals. The ceiling of the Great Hall was inlaid with countless pearls and gems, and the clear light from them made a map of mountains, rivers, and underground energy veins on the floor stand out. The three-dimensional map of mountains, rivers, and underground energy veins was changing violently. From time to time, mountains and rivers could be seen flickering in it, but most of them were deep valleys that made one's scalp go numb. King Yangqiu's lower body was covered with a black skirt-like armor, and a lion belt around his waist, leaving his upper body bare except for a bronze breastplate and half a pauldron. When the disheveled King Yangqiu saw Wuxia come in, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly as if he was smiling. He beckoned at Wuxia and said in a deep voice, "Tanlang, come here and have a look at the terrain here." With a casual point of his finger, the map of mountains, rivers, and underground energy veins on the floor flickered, and revealed a valley about 10,000 miles long and 100 miles wide, shaped like an eye, with a deep pool of water in the center of the eye. The valley was filled with stone peaks that stood about 10,000 feet tall, very thin and very straight. Only the pool of water was hundreds of miles in circumference, which was a beautiful scenery. Near a hill next to the pool, there were many palaces and pavilions made of gold bricks and jade tiles, all of which were shrouded in a faint purple mist. When a breeze blew past, an immortal aura rose into the air. Wuxia cupped his fist and answered, then strode up to the map and fixed his eyes on the valley, which was actually more than 10,000 miles long, but only a few miles long in the map. Presumably, this map was made by Diyu's military court, and was specially used for marching and fighting. As long as Wuxia cast his eyes on a mountain, information about it would be fed back to him in the form of divine sense. After giving the valley a careful look, Wuxia nodded thoughtfully. It was a formation constructed with the help of the natural terrain, and the person who constructed it must be of a very high level. There were a total of 36,000 stone peaks in the valley, and all of them had become the eye of the formation. The formation corresponded to the stars, and there should be an extremely powerful immortal artifact in it as its foundation. That was why it was so powerful. Anyone who was not a true master of formations would find it difficult to recognize the principle of the formation, let alone break it. After pretending to ponder for a while, Wuxia said slowly, "This seems to be a formation constructed by an immortal." King Yangqiu raised his eyebrows and looked at Wuxia happily. Just as he was about to say something, a faint laugh suddenly came from the side. "Since you found out that this is a formation constructed by an immortal, do you have a way to break it, General? If you can really break the formation as the legend says, His Excellency will definitely reward you handsomely. But, can you really understand the secret of this formation?" The laughter was full of sarcasm, and the words were aggressive toward Wuxia. In short, the speaker was full of malice toward Wuxia. Surprised, Wuxia raised his head and looked towards the direction of the voice. He saw a middle-aged man sitting on a four-wheeled wooden chair. He was clad in a clean white long robe, with a black silk belt tied around his waist. He was holding a goose feather fan in his hand, and his hair was disheveled. He looked like a transcendent being. The man was handsome and elegant, but the way he looked at Wuxia was full of disdain, sarcasm, jealousy, and malice. Grinning coldly, Wuxia cupped his fist to the man and asked, "May I know your name, mister?" The man waved his fan slightly, but he didn't say anything in a reserved manner. King Yangqiu glanced at the man and said lightly, "General Tanlang, this old mister is Yu Qingqing, the master of Yu Academy founded by my father." "Yu Academy? What a familiar name. Yu Qingqing?" Wuxia burst out laughing. Wasn't Yu Qingqing the clan master of the Yu clan, and the founder of Yu Academy, when the Yu clan of Great Yin suddenly prospered? This old fellow is not dead yet? Wuxia laughed at himself. He could not believe that he and the Yu clan were fated to meet someone like Yu Qingqing here. No matter why Yu Qingqing was provoking Wuxia, Wuxia just smiled and said, "So old mister, you can break this formation?" As soon as Wuxia said that, Yu Qingqing's face turned purple-red. Chapter 683. Yu Miao's summer villa was located on Mount Hanyu outside Zhongning City. A few palaces built of pitch-black boulders lay between the mountain streams like monsters, connected by small paths. Wild ducks could be seen swimming in the gurgling stream, giving the place an elegant charm that was rarely seen in Diyu. Amidst the trees and rocks, guards clad in tight black leather armors were crouching in dark corners like venomous snakes, glancing around vigilantly with gloomy and deep eyes. From time to time, a thin layer of gray mist would gush out from between the rocks, and vague figures could be seen twisting and flashing in the mist. With the power of the mist, these Yin ghosts were fearless of the scorching sun, and could show themselves in broad daylight, walking leisurely between the mountains. If an outsider invaded the woods, these Yin ghosts would either let out a warning howl, or pounce on the intruder and suck his blood essence dry. In the grass beside the paths, a large number of venomous snakes and insects were wriggling. These venomous snakes and insects were the ferocious species carefully selected by the Yu clan in Zhong province, and fed with curses and poisons, which made them extremely vicious and vicious. Even an immortal would be in danger of dying if bitten by these venomous snakes and insects. Among them, the few kings of snakes and insects were demons that the Yu clan had been raising for countless years, and their venom could even kill a gold immortal. There was a cliff in the mountains, and a stream of white water was shooting out from a hole on the cliff that was tens of feet in diameter. The water was about 10 feet thick, and it was flowing rapidly like a flood dragon, producing a deep, muffled roar that sounded like thunder. Dozens of burly men clad in heavy armors and emanating a lifeless aura stood on both sides of the stream. their grayish-white eyes looking around blankly like dead fish. Meanwhile, a few oracles with the pattern of 9 moons embroidered on their sleeves were sitting on the rocks by the water with their legs crossed, chatting with each other. After entering the hole, and walking along the stream of white water for a few miles, the water would sink into the ground, and there would be a hole emitting a cold air right next to it. After entering the hole and walking down for tens of miles, they would come to a cave abode made of cold jade. The cave abode, about a mile in circumference, was made entirely of a piece of 10,000-year-old cold jade, emanating a cold air that could freeze metal weapons and armors to pieces. The white jade was almost translucent, and dazzling gleams shot out of it like blades and swords, making it impossible for ordinary people to look at it directly. In the middle of the cave abode was a blue xianbing bed. Yu Miao, whose legs were bitten off by Ao Buzin, was lying naked on the bed, gritting his teeth as he underwent surgery from an elder of his clan. The xianbing bed was excavated by the ancestors of Yu clan from a dangerous place in some outer heavenly realm. The temperature of the xianbing was extremely low, and any ordinary immortal item would be frozen and cracked if it were touched by the cold air emanating from the xianbing. If not for Yu Miao's cultivation base, which was comparable to a gold immortal, and the fact that he had taken a lot of rare herbs to protect his heart meridians and body, he would have been frozen into a zombie by now. A dozen elders of the Yu clan in Zhong province sat around Yu Miao, their eyes fixed on the elder, who was the oldest and most senior in Yu clan, and had not shown himself for many years, performing the operation on Yu Miao. The elder stood about 10 feet tall, and his body was withered and shriveled like a mummy. Only his hands were crystal clear, snow-white and delicate, as if they were carved from jade. No hands of a peerless beauty could compare to the breathtaking beauty of his opponent. It was as if all his spirit, energy, and soul had been gathered in his palms, and when he moved his fingers, wisps of jade light would accompany them. Holding a jade dagger, a jade needle, and a roll of unknown transparent thread, the elder quickly sewed up Yu Miao's nerves, blood vessels and meridians, connecting the 2 plump thighs to him. In a corner of the cave abode, a handsome young man was lying on the ground with his eyes wide open. There was a crack between his brows, and it was the wound that went straight into his head that killed him. His legs had been taken away by someone, and were now being attached to Yu Miao's body. The blood that flowed out of the young man's cracked skull was golden in color, mixed with a hint of purple energy. It was the purple energy of immortal blood that only a gold immortal could have. He was at least an 18th tier gold immortal. But now he was lying on the ground, dead like any other mortal. A crisp cracking sound rang out as the elder's jade knife cut through a transparent thread. After completing all the operations, he grabbed a fist-sized medicine jar from a jade table next to Xianbing's bed, carefully dug out some pale green ointment with his fingers, and applied it to the stitches on Yu Miao's limbs. Wherever the ointment touched, the stitches healed quickly. Yu Miao let out a deep cry of pain as the ghost blood in his body gradually flowed into the new blood vessels in his thighs, gradually transforming the remaining gold immortal blood in them. The 2 different types of blood devoured and fused with each other, and the excruciating pain made him feel as if someone was grinding his legs inch by inch with a millstone. The indescribable pain made Yu Mu's face twist. Gritting his teeth, he straightened his upper body and bowed respectfully to the secluded elder. "Great-grandfather, thank you for your help this time. We are really useless. How could we let a lowly man bully us?" he said. Casually, the elder put away the jade knife, jade needle, and thread into his sleeve. "It doesn't matter," he said coolly. "There are bound to be a few times in one's life when one is deceived and taken advantage of. You only had your legs broken. Back then." Laughing strangely, the elder shook his head, turned, and walked into the depths of the cave abode, ignoring Yu Miao and the other elders of Yu clan in Zhong province. Yu Miao exchanged a glance with the elders around him. He knew what the elder was going to say. Years ago, when the Yu clan in Zhong province underwent a great upheaval, the Yu clan in Liangzhu had reached out to take control of the power of the Yu clan in Zhong province, and had sent Yu Miao to Zhong province to seize the position of clan leader. The elder fought with Yu Miao, and as a result, he was severely wounded by the man sent by the Yu clan in Liangzhu, with all his internal organs crushed into meat paste. Fortunately, The ghost god worshipped by the elder had the power to bring the dead back to life. Yu Miao and the others had secretly held a blood sacrifice, and the ghost god had saved the elder's life. Even so, the elder had to lie in bed for decades before he could move again, and over the years he had been cultivating in seclusion in Mount Hanyu, never going out to meet anyone. The crowd exchanged glances, and Yu Miao cried out in a low voice, "Yu Lei is dead and I've lost another son." The faces of the elders of Yu clan were 3 inches longer than a donkey's, and there was a hint of complaint in their eyes as they looked at Yu Miao. You Miao have only lost one son. In any case, you have many sons and countless grandchildren. You just need to have a few more sons. But in order to give Wuqi the so-called cover-up fee, under the joint pressure of Yu Miao and Wuqi, all the elders present had taken out a lot of gold and silver, and lost countless natural treasures. A son was nothing more than a concubine, something that could be obtained with a shiver. But the gold and silver, as well as the natural treasures, were accumulated by these elders bit by bit. It only took them a moment to make a son, but it took them thousands of years of hard work to accumulate so much wealth. But in the end, because Yu Miao's son insulted King Yangqiu, they had to give away all their wealth. Despite the resentment in their hearts, none of the elders said a word. It was a personal grudge between Yu Miao and Wuqi, but it had harmed the interests of these elders, and they would not support Yu Miao unconditionally. If it were not for the fact that they needed Yu Miao to take the lead in competing with Yu Miao for the power of the clan, they would not care about Yu Miao's life and death. But now, Yu Miao had seized on Yu Miao's mistake, and was determined to strip him of his position as the left minister of the Directorate of Celestials. Whether these elders would still support Yu Miao would depend on the situation. Yu Miao instantly understood what these elders were thinking, and it was undoubtedly a great threat to him. Without the support of these elders of Yu clan in Zhong province, with Yu Miao's overall strength, it was very likely that he would be tortured by Yu Miao within 3 to 5 years. Yu Miao cleared his throat and said in a deep voice, "I'll make up for your loss with the properties under my name." After calculating the properties under Yu Miao's name, the few elders shook their heads at the same time. Yu Miao's current net worth was not enough to make up for the loss of a dozen elders present. Yu Miao understood what these elders were thinking. He reached out his hand and grabbed a scroll out of thin air, then threw it to the nearest elder. "These are the mineral veins I've secretly developed over the past 300 years, as well as the immortal markets I've opened in other provinces. There should be enough for you to divide among yourselves." The elders of Yu clan leaned over and carefully read the many properties recorded on the scroll. Then they could not help but gasp at the same time. As the elders of Yu clan, they had violated Diyu's ban by secretly mining some immortal stones and energy stone veins, and secretly selling some rare metals and spirit herbs. They had more or less colluded with those immortals. But this was the first time they had seen someone like Yu Miao, who had mined hundreds of immortal stones and energy stone veins, and opened more than 200 immortal markets of different sizes. But it was true that if these properties were distributed equally, it would be more than enough to make up for the loss of the elders. The elders looked at Yu Miao calmly, their faces once again wearing a slightly respectful smile that Yu Miao was familiar with. Yu Miao nodded with satisfaction and said in a deep voice, "I won't rest until Tan Lang is dead. But he is now King Yangqiu's personal guard. If we assassinate him again, I'm afraid that His Highness..." He paused for a moment, then frowned and continued, "Besides, with my cultivation base, I can't divine his exact whereabouts. Yu Miao must have done something to him." The elders turned to look at Yu Miao at the same time, wondering how he was going to solve the problem. Wu Qi had King Yangqiu's support, and if they killed Wu Qi, they would probably offend King Yangqiu. But if they continued to kill Wu Qi, they would probably have to face Yu Miao directly. With Yu Miao's cultivation base, he could kill so many elders without leaving any traces behind. Yu Miao gave a wry smile and sighed. "This is a personal grudge between me and that guy. Let me deal with it alone." Gritting his teeth, he said in a deep voice, "To tell you the truth, I'm going to hire immortals to assassinate him at a high price." The elders were startled, and then they burst into laughter at the same time. Obviously, hiring immortals to assassinate Wu Qi at a high price was the best way to do it. They exchanged a glance and nodded at the same time. Now that the war was in chaos, the death of Wuxia was not a big deal. One of the elders hesitated for a moment, then suddenly asked in a low voice, "In that case, why don't we pay a high price and get Yu Miao?" The corner of Yu Miao's mouth curved into a smile. Chapter 684. It was a nameless mountain range at the border of Mingu Province and a 6th-grade province under the jurisdiction of Zhong Province. Hundreds of years ago, the Directorate of Celestials of Zhong Province had designated this nameless mountain range as a testing ground for some new oracles who had just joined the Directorate of Celestials. Here, they would conduct some strange magic spells and sacrificial rituals, and even let the new oracles fight with powerful demon beasts. Therefore, it had been a very long time since anyone had entered this nameless mountain range. If one were to walk in this mountain range, one might be possessed by a ghost who had missed an experiment, and have his blood essence and soul taken away. If one accidentally heard someone calling one's name, and answered casually, one might have his soul sucked away. If one drank a mouthful of water from a stream, perhaps some oracles who specialized in poisons from the Directorate of Celestials had poisoned it before, and a mouthful of water could kill tens of thousands of people. It was a dangerous place, a barren place with few resources, and a place that neither Mingu Province nor Zhong Province would pay attention to. It was frequented by new oracles from Zhong Province's Directorate of Celestials all year round. Not to mention immortals and itinerant cultivators. Even some little demon beasts who had just gained sentience and learned how to absorb natural energy to cultivate were all killed. Therefore, there was nothing worth paying attention to in this mountain range, which was millions of miles in circumference. But as the saying goes, it is darkest under the lamp. An itinerant heaven immortal named Immortal Gord had colluded with a group of itinerant cultivators and built a large immortal market in this nameless mountain range. After hundreds of years of development, because of the protection of the oracles from Zhong Province's Directorate of Celestials, and the fact that Immortal Gord was extremely cautious, the market had developed into the largest, safest, and most secretive immortal market in both Zhong Province and Mingu Province. But the market had strict rules and extremely complicated safety regulations. Immortals who entered and left the market could only be introduced by an absolutely reliable acquaintance through the teleportation formations set up everywhere. So far, no outsider had ever found out where the Gord Immortal Market was located in this mountain range. And no one had ever found out who was the power behind it. 500 miles underground under an unknown mountain, there was a naturally formed karst cave shaped like a gourd. It was where the Gord Immortal Market was located. The natural calabash-shaped cave was 300 miles long. The smaller part of the calabash had a diameter of 130 miles, while the larger part had a diameter of 270 miles. Countless shops floated in the huge gourd-shaped space, divided into 9 distinct levels from top to bottom. The shops on the top floor were all tall and magnificent palace-like buildings. These buildings were all opened by the most powerful immortal alliances and cultivation clans in Zhong Province and Mingu Province. One of them, with a radius of 4 miles, was the most gorgeous and luxurious shop with 9 entrances. It was none other than the Myriad Immortal Palace, which was opened in the Gord Immortal Market by the Union of Myriad Immortals. It mainly sold all kinds of flying swords and magical artifacts, as well as medicinal pills and talismans. At the same time, it purchased all valuable natural treasures. From the top to the bottom, the size and specifications of the shops were reduced. The shops at the lowest level were simply some 2- or 3-storied small buildings made of green bricks and green tiles. These shops were the strongholds of some small itinerant cultivator forces. They did some small business to exchange for some energy stones for their cultivation. Occasionally, they would be lucky enough to receive some valuable natural treasures, which they would immediately send to the shops opened by major forces, such as Myriad Immortal Palace, in exchange for a large amount of energy stones and immortal stones. There were more than 7,000 shops run by these small powers in the entire Gord Immortal Market. The vast space was divided into 9 floors, and each floor was separated by streets condensed from clouds and mist. The space between the shops was extremely vast, and with all kinds of complicated restrictive and defensive formations, It could protect the privacy of the customers who came to the Gourd Immortal Market very well. Immortal Gourd, who controlled the entire Gourd Immortal Market, had spent a great deal of effort and money to build this place. He had actually obtained hundreds of huge stone pillars from the Directorate of Celestials and erected them on the streets. Dazzling green light filled the entire cave, and no one with stealth or escape art could hide in the light. Connected to the spirit fire in the earth veins, these stone pillars formed a powerful earth fire array. If anyone dared to cause trouble in the Gourd Immortal Market, the green fire spewed out from the hundreds of giant stone pillars was enough to melt an ordinary gold immortal. With such strict protection, there had never been any accidents since the establishment of the Gourd Immortal Market. Lu Buwei was sitting in the backyard of a small palace on the 3rd floor of Gourd Immortal Market, flipping through the thick account book in front of him with his fingers. While mentally calculating all the inflow and outflow of this month, he was jotting down lines of numbers in another account book. Gradually, a complacent smile appeared on Lu Buwei's face. Shaking his head and humming a little tune, he wrote down the last few numbers in the account book with satisfaction. In just a few years after being seriously wounded and fleeing from the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean, Lu Buwei had wandered to Pangu continent. But with his means and ability, it did not take him long to sneak into the Gourd Immortal Market. First, he took shelter as the manager of an ordinary shop. After spending a year recuperating from his injury, he immediately killed the shop owner and his whole family, took their souls, and reformed them into heavenly ghosts. With his business skills, Lu Buwei had established a business in the Gourd Immortal Market in just a few years. He had expanded from a medium-sized shop on the 7th level to a large chamber of commerce on the 3rd level of the market. Now Lu Buwei's spring and autumn trading had hundreds of employees, including dozens of heaven immortals. The monthly income of energy stones and immortal stones was astronomical. In the past few years, the Lu clan, who stayed in outer heavenly realms, had also sent a large number of elites to Pangu continent. Lu Buwei had also summoned his clan members and asked them to set up shops in Gourd Immortal Market, while running various businesses outside. On the surface, Lu Buwei only had one shop, spring and autumn trading, but in fact, there were as many as 18 large trading houses controlled by his clan in Gourd Immortal Market alone. These 18 trading houses were originally owned by the itinerant cultivator clans on Pangu continent, but Lu Buwei had gradually infiltrated and eroded their strength with various shady means. Now of the 5,000 people in these clans, only about 1,000 were left, and their souls had been imprisoned by Lu Buwei, making them all slaves and lackeys of the clan. Lu Buwei's ability to rebuild such a large business in such a short time was truly amazing. After checking the account book of this month's income, Lu Buwei opened the door of the secret chamber and stored the account book inside. After that, he admired the mountains of immortal stones and other rare treasures in the chamber, and Lu Buwei laughed heartily for a while. Because he was in a good mood, after leaving the secret chamber, Lu Buwei went to his bedroom, where he ordered a few juniors to bring him a few girls who had been abducted yesterday, and gave them a good time. These girls were all stunning beauties, and they had all been abducted from their clans and sold as slaves by slave traders among the immortals and itinerant cultivators. As Lu Buwei was very interested in female charms, he immediately bought these few girls and kept them as his private property. Today was the first time he had taken care of these unfortunate girls. After torturing these girls to his heart's content and robbing them of their chastity in the most brutal way possible, Lu Buwei, who was in a better mood, took a shower and dressed up like a rich old official, swaggered into the main hall of the spring and autumn trading house, eagerly attending to the guests. The chief manager, second manager, and third manager in the lobby were all Lu Buwei's descendants. When they saw Lu Buwei personally attending to the customers in the lobby, these managers and workers worked very hard, trying their best to attract customers with the best attitude, lest Lu Buwei would find out about their mistakes. Spring and autumn enterprises' luck was quite good today. In just a quarter of an hour after Lu Buwei personally took charge of the main hall, more than a dozen loose cultivators had come to sell the spirit herbs they had gathered. Among them, there were a few extremely valuable herbs. Lu Buwei gladly gave these itinerant cultivators a good price and bought all the spirit herbs. Among them, The price of a violet dragon blood fruit alone was 100,000 times more than all the energy stones he had paid. The violet dragon blood fruit was an upper-grade medicinal ingredient that could be used to concoct gold immortal pills, and Lu Buwei had bought it, and a few other spirit herbs of similar grade at the price of a mid-grade heaven immortal pill. Lu Buwei had made a great profit from this transaction. Just as Lu Buwei was about to return to the backyard with a few spirit herbs in his hands, Patriarch Yuan Hua, with a gloomy face, followed an itinerant heaven immortal cultivator, and walked slowly through the front door of spring and autumn trading. Lu Buwei's body suddenly trembled. He took a deep breath and couldn't help but mutter to himself, "Why is this blood energy so dense? TSK, it will bring great benefits to my heavenly ghost grand magic." Patriarch Yuan Hua shuddered as well. He stopped and turned to look at Lu Buwei, then arched his brows in astonishment and said, "Someone has actually formed the body of a heavenly ghost? Hee. If my blood sea is guarded by tens of thousands of heavenly ghosts from outer heavenly domains, its power will increase by more than 100 times. Especially my blood-draining ghost flag. I need a lot of fiends and heavenly ghosts in it. I was worried that I did not have a place to find heavenly ghosts." Separated by a distance of hundreds of feet, Lu Buwei and Patriarch Yuan Hua looked at each other from a distance. Their eyes flickered and flickered, showing their deep friendship. After the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Lu Buwei put down the herbs in his hand and hurried out of the door. He cupped his fist and bowed to Patriarch Yuan Hua. "Please forgive me for not going out to meet you, honorable guests." Patriarch Yuan Hua grinned and said, "It is fate that brings us together. If fellow Taoists can work together with me in cultivation, it will bring great benefits to both you and me. Ha ha ha. The blood sea grand magic and the boundless heavenly ghosts will bring both our great Daos." After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuan Hua nodded reservedly and said, "If fellow Taoists can acknowledge me as your master, I'll teach you all the secrets of the blood sea. What do you think?" Cultivating the blood sea grand magic with the body of a heavenly ghost was an excellent aptitude. As Patriarch Yuan Hua was all alone now, he really wanted to take in a few disciples. Patriarch Yuan Hua knew very well that if he wanted to make a living in the world of cultivators, how could he not have a few disciples? Acknowledge Patriarch Yuan Hua as his master? Lu Buwei frowned. No matter what, he was the leader of a clan, and he was an ambitious and ruthless man. How could he acknowledge someone as his master so easily? Patriarch Yuan Hua did not say anything. He smiled faintly and unleashed his blood and energy, unleashing an enormous pressure that forced Lu Buwei to take a few steps back. Lu Buwei looked at Patriarch Yuan Hua with surprise and delight, then quickly bowed and said, "That's great. But, Senior, please come in and have a chat." Patriarch Yuan Hua laughed. Ignoring the itinerant heaven immortal who brought him into Gourd Immortal Market, he strode into spring and autumn trading. Chapter 685. Patriarch Yuan Hua and Lu Buwei sat opposite each other in a secret chamber in the backyard of spring and autumn trading. The chamber was simply furnished, consisting of a bed, 2 hassocks, and an incense burner shaped like a mountain in the middle of the chamber. The warm fragrance coming out of it made one feel warm all over, but once inhaled, it would turn into a stream of cold spring water that flowed through one's body, stimulating one's spirit, and having the effect of driving away evil spirits. A faint blood-red light could be seen drifting beneath Patriarch Yuan Hua's body, and a plume of blood energy rose from the top of his head, forming a cloud platform 30 feet in circumference. 3 blood-colored lotus flowers the size of water tanks were bobbing up and down. There were 18 lotus thrones in the middle of the 3 blood-colored lotus flowers, but they were empty. These were the Dharma thrones of the blood-draining fiends that Patriarch Yuan Hua had learned from the Blood Sea Grand Magic. On each of these lotus thrones should be a blood fiend cultivated from the blood essence and souls of hundreds of millions of living beings. When Lord Blood Ocean was at his peak, the weakest of the 18 blood-draining fiends he had condensed had the cultivation base of a 9th-tier primordial immortal. When they joined forces, he even dared to break into the celestial court alone and abduct the fairies serving the great celestial emperor. But now, Lord Blood Ocean was only left with a broken wisp of his true spirit, and had fused with Patriarch Yuan Hua. Although all the Blood Sea Grand Magic scriptures had been passed down, no one knew who killed him, nor did they know the origin of that ancient celestial fiend, Li Xuezi, or the relationship between him and Lord Blood Ocean. Naturally, these 18 blood-draining fiends were gone, and Patriarch Yuan Hua had to work hard to condense them. If he were to condense them out of thin air, the amount of blood essence and souls consumed would be astronomical, and the energy and mental strength consumed would be terrifying. But if he could get 18 heavenly ghosts who had achieved a certain level of cultivation base, let them devour a large amount of their own blood essence and souls, and then refine them into incorporeal bodies in the blood sea fiend flame, he could save a lot of time and condense them into blood-draining fiends. More importantly, the blood-draining fiends refined from heavenly ghosts would have the ability to travel through the void, and when used together with the Blood Sea Grand Magic, their power would be increased by 100 times. If he could obtain the strongest undead heavenly ghost king in Ghost Domain, and use it as the true form of the blood fiend, the mere thought of its power was enough to drive Patriarch Yuan Hua crazy. Patriarch Yuan Hua focused his mind and circulated his energy, slowly explaining the secret of Blood Sea Grand Magic word by word. Every time he uttered a word, a thumb-sized blood-colored lotus flower would fall from the blood cloud above his head. As soon as the blood-colored lotus landed on Lu Buwei, it immediately melted into his body, transforming into a stream of pure magical power that circulated through his entire body and quickly fused with his immortal soul. Lu Buwei felt like he was floating in the air. The blood in his body was getting thicker and thicker, and the magic power contained in his blood was getting stronger and stronger. His blood flowed faster and faster, and gradually his blood vessels swelled. Blood surged in his blood vessels like raging dragons. The surging sound of blood echoed in the secret room, even making the Zhongtal bronze sensor buzzing in the middle of the room. Just by inheriting Patriarch Yuan Hua's foundational cultivation technique of Blood Sea Grand Magic, Lu Buwei had already sensed the tremendous benefits it brought. In order to win over Lu Buwei's heart, Patriarch Yuan Hua had not hesitated to use his prime blood energy to impart his cultivation technique to Lu Buwei. As a result, Lu Buwei had already formed the body of a heavenly ghost, and he had a wisp of the aura of the indestructible body of heavenly ghosts. With Patriarch Yuan Hua's help, Lu Buwei felt as if his body was on fire. Hot air billowed around him, and an endless power was growing inside him. Gradually, he had an impulse that he could shatter the stars and overturn the earth with just one punch. Originally, Lu Buwei's cultivation base was not very high, but as Patriarch Yuan Hua imparted his cultivation technique to him, his cultivation base was soaring at a tremendous rate. The Blood Sea Grand Magic was bizarre and evil, and there was no limit to one's cultivation base. When one's cultivation base grew stronger, the sea of blood would grow larger, and so would one's cultivation base. All the magic power was stored in the sea of blood, and it had nothing to do with the cultivator's true form. When one attained the mastery of the Blood Sea Grand Magic, one's fleshly body and the sea of blood would merge into one. Then one would only need to crazily extract the blood essence and souls of living beings to conjure the myriad spirits' blood pool. With that, one would be able to rapidly improve their magic power, just like what Patriarch Yuan Hua had done on Myriad Immortals' planet. If one could gather the blood essence and souls of trillions of living beings to conjure the myriad spirits' blood pool at the same time, and then completely absorb it with one's own sea of blood, one would be able to step into the realm of primordial in just one day. Patriarch Yuan Hua kept teaching Lu Buwei the various essences and wonders of the Blood Sea Grand Magic. Lu Buwei was so happy that he almost burst out laughing. Respectfully, he learned all the secrets of the Blood Sea Grand Magic from Patriarch Yuan Hua. When Patriarch Yuan Hua put away the sea of blood and the blood-colored lotus, Lu Buwei did not need any more words from Patriarch Yuan Hua. He leaped off the cloud bed, dropped to his knees respectfully, and kowtowed to Patriarch Yuan Hua. Master, I Lu Buwei, am fated to be your disciple. I will definitely be filial to Master with all my heart, and do my best to develop our sect. Lu Buwei's eyes narrowed into slits as he smiled. Patriarch Yuan Hua was obviously a formidable immortal, and with his support, Lu Buwei's life on Pangu continent would be much better. Patriarch Yuan Hua nodded with satisfaction. With Lu Buwei, a disciple who was obviously rich and had many juniors, he would be able to rebuild Yuanhua sect. Once he had trained all his disciples into immortals, his cultivation base should have recovered to its original level. At that time, he would definitely seek revenge from Wuxia. Laughing hideously, Patriarch Yuanhua began to fantasize about tearing Wuxia into 1,000 pieces, seizing Princess Zhonglu, and having fun with her. With Lu Buwei's cooperation, he could keep summoning countless heavenly ghosts from Ghost Domain, and fuse them into his sea of blood, then absorb as much blood essence and soul energy as he could on Pangu continent to restore his cultivation base. With that, it would not take long for him to seek revenge from Wuxia. Lu Buwei was a formidable figure. Just a few laughs from Patriarch Yuanhua had allowed Lu Buwei to see through the lust in his heart. Lu Buwei smiled and left the secret chamber respectfully, then summoned a few of his grandsons. Before long, a dozen beautiful girls were sent into the secret chamber. Lu Buwei frankly admitted to Patriarch Yuanhua that it was a little gift from him to show filial piety to his master. The door of the secret chamber slowly closed. Standing in front of it, Lu Buwei cocked his head to listen to the movements inside. When he heard the ripping of clothes, as well as the screams and begging of the girls, Lu Buwei smiled contentedly. Flicking his sleeves, Lu Buwei laughed in a low voice and said, "Why are you begging? Why are you crying? You are lucky to be able to serve the old immortal with your bodies. Hee, if you can give birth to a son or a daughter for the old immortal." Humph. A bright gleam flashed in Lu Buwei's eyes as he told his grandsons to guard the door carefully. After that, he strode out with his sleeves fluttering. In the meeting hall in the backyard, Lu Buwei summoned all his descendants and told them that he had become Patriarch Yuanhua's disciple. He asked them to start checking the resources they had, and quickly transform from the mode of running a merchant to the mode of running a sect. An idea had formed in Lu Buwei's mind. With Patriarch Yuanhua as his disciple, he could use him to build a sect of immortal cultivators with the Lu clan as the controller behind the scenes. With that, the power he had in his hands would be strengthened, and the Lu clan would have another layer of protection, and the safety of the Lu clan would be greatly improved. Little Wuqi, I'll definitely make you pay for what you've done to me in the past. Lu Buwei narrowed his eyes and suddenly laughed in a deep voice. After pondering for a while, he issued various orders to his descendants, and the huge Lu clan immediately began to operate at full speed. Over the next few days, Lu Buwei consulted Patriarch Yuanhua about various mystic techniques every day, while the Lu clan began to pool all kinds of resources and manpower. A large number of Lu clan members and their subordinates had become Patriarch Yuanhua's disciples. In just a few days, the newly established Yuanhua sect had recruited over 3,000 disciples, including 60 heaven immortals. The newly established Yuanhua sect was much stronger than the sect that Patriarch Yuanhua had spent several dozens of periods to build. What made Patriarch Yuanhua even more satisfied was that Lu Buwei was extremely wealthy. All his disciples were given the best magical treasures, spirit items, immortal items, and many others. Even the most ordinary gold core cultivators were given magical items that were several grades higher than their level, especially those with outstanding aptitudes. Not to mention the spirit pills, spirit talismans, and other personal items, all of which were the best of the best. How could Yuanhua sect in the past compare with the army of money that Lu Buwei had meticulously built? Patriarch Yuanhua was overjoyed. Without hesitation, he began to teach all the essences of Blood Sea Grand Magic to his disciples according to their cultivation base. Blood Sea Grand Magic was an ancient top-grade Fiend League cultivation technique. It allowed them to cultivate at an extremely fast speed. And apart from having to guard against the backlashes of inner demons, there were almost no bottlenecks. But, even if they were attacked by inner demons, as long as they took precautions in advance, the inner demons would be devoured by the blood sea and turned into blood-draining fiends. In just half a month, the disciples of Yuanhua sect had preliminarily condensed their blood and energy into a small sea of blood inside their bodies. Once the sea of blood was formed, as long as one drop of blood essence escaped from it, they would be immortal, unless all the blood drops were destroyed in an instant. With such a powerful ancient fiend cultivation technique, Yuanhua sect's morale soared instantly. Bursting with confidence, Lu Buwei began to discuss with Patriarch Yuan Hua how to invade Gourd Immortal Market. It would be best if they could kill Immortal Gourd, and then take over the cave abode. The only thing to worry about was that they did not know who was the master behind the Immortal Gourd. The spirit vein and spirit chi under the Gourd Immortal Market were not very good. The Gourd Immortal Market was not a good place to set up a sect. While Lu Buwei and Patriarch Yuan Hua were discussing the matter, one of Immortal Gourd's executing disciples suddenly sent a secret message to all the immortals in Gourd Immortal Market. Someone was offering a huge reward for the head of one of King Diyu's personal guards, and anyone who could kill him would be rewarded with a huge amount of immortal stones, energy stones, and other materials. If anyone could capture Tanlang's personal guard alive and hand him over to Immortal Gourd, the reward would be a cave abode with an immortal vein. A cave abode with an immortal vein. Lu Buwei and Patriarch Yuan Hua were tempted immediately. Chapter 686. Many immortals in Gourd Immortal Market had gathered together. It was a wooden hall at the bottom of Gourd Immortal Market. All the planks were made of ordinary pine wood. Although the material was simple, it took a lot of effort to grind them. The patterns of the planks were put together to form a large pattern of clouds and dragons flying in the sky. There was once a bored immortal who estimated that the cost of gathering so many pine planks that coincidentally formed such a large cloud dragon diagram would be equivalent to using 10 times the amount of immortal stones to build such a seemingly ordinary hall. A large number of hassocks were placed in the spacious hall, on which sat Lu Buwei, Patriarch Yuan Hua, and a large number of immortals, who were divided into groups according to their relationship with each other. At the end of the hall was a 3 feet tall wooden platform, on which sat a gaunt Taoist in a yellow Taoist robe. A fist-sized gourd hung from his bun. He was Immortal Gourd, the manager of Gourd Immortal Market. Lu Buwei studied Immortal Gourd curiously. This was the first time he had seen Immortal Gourd in person, after running the market for several years. Patriarch Yuan Hua gave Immortal Gourd a glance, then sent a voice transmission to Lu Buwei. Gold Immortal, don't provoke him for the time being. When I've gathered enough blood essence and soul and restored my cultivation base, killing him will be a piece of cake. Lu Buwei's heart skipped a beat. Immortal Gourd actually had the cultivation base of a gold immortal? What tier of a gold immortal was he? What kind of connections did he have that allowed him to run his business here when Panga continent was in a mess? Gradually, more and more immortals arrived. When the immortal in charge of Myriad Immortal Mansion arrived with a few attendants, Immortal Gourd waved his sleeve, and 20 iron cabinets, each 6 feet in length, width and height, appeared in front of everyone. The doors of the cabinets opened silently, revealing a pile of neatly polished immortal stones. Immortal Gourd glanced at the crowd of immortals and said calmly, "Kill Tanlang, and you will be rewarded handsomely. This is the deposit that my client left with me." After pondering for a moment, Immortal Gourd said, "The client has a very high reputation in Gourd Immortal Market. I can't reveal his identity, but as long as you kill Tanlang, you'll be rewarded handsomely." With a flip of his palm, a wisp of purple aura that was 3 feet long and as thick as a thumb appeared on Spirit Gourd's palm. With a flick of his finger, this wisp of chi flew past the immortals at lightning speed. The immortals all used their divine senses to sense this chi, and were shocked to find that it was an extremely pure and high-quality immortal chi. The immortal energy contained in this wisp of immortal energy was almost equivalent to all the immortal energy contained in a high-grade immortal stone. This wisp of immortal energy is a wisp of energy randomly extracted from the cave abode with the immortal vein promised by the client. Immortal Gourd waved his hand and retracted the wisp of purple energy. With a smile on his face he said, "That immortal abode is extremely secretive, and the client will swear a heart demon oath that as long as any fellow immortal can capture Tanlang alive and bring him to me, the immortal abode will be handed over properly, and no one under the heaven will ever know its location again." Lu Buwei and Patriarch Yuan Hua exchanged a glance. Patriarch Yuan Hua nodded with a smile. It seemed that they had to capture that kid named Tanlang alive, and bring him to Immortal Gourd. Although he was King Yangqiu's personal guard, It was worth it for the sake of an immortal abode of excellent quality. It would be very risky to plot against a king of Du, but how could it be risky to plot against a mere personal guard? There were mountains of immortal stones, countless precious treasures, and the promise of an immortal abode. The immortals in charge of the various powers in Gourd Immortal Market decided at the same time to use their respective forces to capture Tan Lang alive. One after another, they took a jade slip from Immortal Gourd, which recorded Tan Lang's current location. In fact, it was not Tan Lang's address, but the location of King Yangqiu's army's encampment. As King Yangqiu's personal guard, where else could he go if not by his side? In addition to the address, the jade slip also contained a clear portrait of Tan Lang, so clear that every hair on Tan Lang's face could be seen clearly. Next to the portrait were also the divine abilities and magic that Tan Lang was good at. For example, his cultivation base of the true body of heaven and earth scripture was very close to that of the second Panga heaven, and his mastery of all kinds of magic and curses was extremely profound, but no one knew the exact level of his cultivation base. A general of Du who cultivated both magic and fleshly body. Some of the immortals in charge of the minor powers frowned when they saw the information. It was relatively easy to deal with a general or an oracle of Du. But if there was a freak who cultivated both magic and fleshly body, it would take a lot of immortals with the same cultivation base as him to kill him. And if they wanted to capture him alive, it would take even more effort and planning. But Lu Buwei and Patriarch Yuan Hua had already left the Great Hall with a smile on their faces, and the immortals in charge of the major powers, including Myriad Immortal Mansion, had also left confidently. They were in a hurry to inform their respective powers to send powerful immortals to capture Tan Lang as soon as possible. Otherwise, someone else would take advantage of the situation. Now that Du's army was carrying out a devastating attack on Myriad Immortal Alliance, no one knew how many itinerant cultivators and itinerant immortals would be killed. If what Immortal Gourd said was true, that the immortal abode was very well hidden, and could avoid the search of Du's army, then it would be of great value to any power. Not to mention that thousands of powers in Gourd Immortal Market were already preparing to deal with Wuxia. Wuxia was provoking Yu Qingqing in a slightly mocking tone in the Great Hall of King Yangqiu's army. His rhetorical question made Yu Qingqing's face turn purple. Wuxia knew that the old fellow must have suffered a lot in the formation, and there was no way he could break it. Yu Qingqing's face turned purple with anger, and a group of men and women in silk robes, all carefully selected handsome men and beautiful women with impeccable manners and bearing, jumped out at the same time, pointing their fingers at Wuxia and scolding him with their words in pen. It was especially so for a young man, who was the most handsome, had the most elegant figure, and was clad in the most luxurious clothes. He approached Wuxia step by step, pointing his finger at Wuqia's nose, and began to teach him a lesson. How dare you? Who do you think you are? How dare you disrespect Master Yu? You're just a reckless fool, who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Do you think you're qualified to study the formation that even Master Yu can't break? The young man's saliva almost splashed on Wuqia's face. Look at you, he said, shaking his head. I can tell you're from a humble background. I even doubt that you can read. You can break the formation? What a joke. Wuxia did not say a word. He folded his arms over his chest, and looked coldly at the group of arrogant and presumptuous young men in front of him. A mocking sneer hung at the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were full of disdain. His attitude had infuriated the group of men and women who were dressed in luxurious clothing. One after another, they accused Wuxia of being disrespectful to Master Yu, saying that he was a vulgar, rude, lazy, incompetent, arrogant and despotic man who deserved to die 1,000 times for his crimes. Standing next to the map, King Yangqiu watched with a straight face. After a quarter of an hour, when the young men and women had almost run out of saliva, he snorted coldly. Just then, the young man who pointed at Wuqia's nose and scolded him snapped. You bastard, it's clear that even your parents are not. He could scold Wuxia, but Wuxia treated it as a pack of mad dogs, and he did not even have the motivation to get angry. But when the young man insulted his parents, Wuqia's eyes turned cold, and he kicked the young man in the face. A dark shadow tore through the air, and a muffled boom rang out as Wuqia's leg smashed down heavily. The young man was born with a sharp tongue, but apart from that, his cultivation base was really weak. Wuxi's kick smashed down, breaking his tibia, spine, sternum, ribs, and scapula at the same time. Cracking noises rang out endlessly, and before the young man could even let out a miserable howl, he was sent flying backward with blood spraying out from his body. The group of young men and women in the great hall cried out in alarm and jumped back like frightened rabbits. Wuxi gave them a cold glance and said coolly, "You can scold me, I don't care. But if you scold my parents, I deserve to kill you." Yu Qingqing's face turned blue with anger. He jumped up from the four-wheeled wooden chair, pointed at Wuxi and bellowed, "How dare you kill people in front of His Highness, you little brat? Do you still have any respect for His Highness?" With a faint smile on his face, Wuxi put down his arms, cupped his fist, and bowed to King Yangqiu. "If I may ask, old Mr. Yu," he said in a deep voice, "before His Highness could speak to me, these ignorant men and women had already scolded me. Do they still have any respect for His Highness?" Wu Qi snorted coldly, tilted his head up and said proudly, "But I was the one who let them insult me for 15 minutes without saying a single word. Do you think I'm disrespecting your highness?" Yu Qingqing was so angry that his throat grew thicker. Roaring in exasperation, he pointed at Wu Qi and shouted at King Yangqiu, "Your Highness, please order me to kill this fiend." King Yangqiu gave Yu Qingqing a cold look and asked coolly, "Can Master Yu break the formation in the valley?" Yu Qingqing paused for a moment, then said awkwardly, I'm trying to break the formation." King Yangqiu ignored Yu Qingqing. He beckoned to Wu Qi and said, "Tan Lang, come here and study this formation for me. Let's see if you can break it. I've received information that the Lord of Wandering Immortal Hall is hiding in this valley. If you can break it, I'll give you a great merit." With a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed to King Yangqiu. Then he strode to King Yangqiu's side and began to study the various scenes in the map. Yu Qingqing's face turned extremely unsightly. Pointing at the young man who was killed by Wu Qi with a kick, he said coldly, "Your Highness, this man is the eldest grandson of the prefecture overseer of Yu Province." King Yangqiu looked at Yu Qingqing coldly, and after a full 10 minutes he said coolly, "The prefecture overseer of Yu Province has failed in educating his son. He has insulted the parents of one of my generals with filthy words. It's a very fair and reasonable punishment. What do you think, Master Yu?" Yu Qingqing opened his mouth, but could not say a word for a long time. Meanwhile, Wu Qi, who was studying the formation, smiled. Just as he was about to report his analysis of the formation to King Yangqiu, his heart suddenly beat 49 times violently. With each beat, a great amount of blood rushed through his body. Wu Qi felt waves of numbness all over his body, as if a dark cloud was pressing down on him from above. Vaguely, Wu Qi sensed a terrible killing intent coming at him. Chapter 687. The Yu Academy had planted quite a number of spies in the Yu clan of the Zhong province, and this was only to be expected. Yu Qingqing was born in the Yu clan in Liangzhu, and was the clan master of all the Yu clan in the world. It was from Liangzhu that Yu Miao went to the Yu clan in Zhong province to take up the post of clan master. He brought a large number of Yu clan members with him to help him lay a foundation in Zhong province, and among them were people from Yu Academy. As Yu Miao served as the clan master in Zhong province for so many years, Yu Academy's power had infiltrated everywhere in Zhong province. Laughing complacently, Yu Qingqing turned to his disciples and said, "I'm 70% sure I can break the formation in the valley. But why did I have to act as if I was helpless against that formation, and even let the young prince lose a large number of people inside? Go back and think about the mystery, and report it to me in a few days. I'll take it as the topic of your exam this year." After helping Yu Miao win the power of High Province, Tan Lang had obtained all kinds of spells from the Directorate of Celestials. Then he showed an amazing aptitude for cultivating both magic and fleshly body, and in just a few days he had achieved a profound attainment in magic. Early this morning he killed Yu Lei, the son of Yu Miao, the great elder of the Yu clan, and at the same time summoned a ghost god to seriously injure Yu Miao. Many of Yu Qingqing's disciples bowed and praised at the same time. "Master is brilliant. What a good plan! What a good plan! Cold sweat was dripping from Yu Qingqing's forehead. Having a supreme oracle cultivated by yourself and borrowing the power of other supreme oracles are two completely different things. The young prince's schemes are indeed deep. No wonder he didn't give any face today and completely sided with that brat. Sitting on a comfortable bed wrapped in golden clouds in his tent, Yu Qingqing gave Wuqi his final evaluation with a cold grin on his face, his left arm wrapped around a little maidservant in a green dress, and his right arm leaning against a pretty maidservant in a white dress, asking the maidservant to clean his ears with a set of special tools. If he can break the simplest heavenly thunder formation derived from the interaction and restraint of 5 elements, does he really think he can break the star Luo formation in front of us? Yu Qingqing sneered and threw the scroll aside disdainfully. Remember, this is my strategy of retreating in order to advance, he said coolly. Let the young prince put this child in an important position. After this child suffers losses in the formation, I will make a move to break the formation in one fell swoop. If the young prince doesn't want to put him in an important position, I can't. In front of all the disciples, he reached his hand into the little maidservant's collar and pulled out 2 fair, smooth breasts. Then he slowly played with them in his hand and gently flicked the 2 snow-white lumps of red berries. I'll give you some hints, he said softly. Master Lao Wang has trusted me all these years, but young master has his own ideas. He has always felt that he feels uncomfortable when I am telling him what to do. Tan Lang was a man of the wilderness, and his background was unknown. He was talented and intelligent, and had figured out the technique of absorbing Pangu's sacred energy to strengthen his fleshly body. After joining the army in Anhui City in Anlu County, Zhong Province, he was quickly put in an important position, and was recruited by Yu Miao's grandson Yu Zong. Eventually, he became Yu Miao's right-hand man in the struggle for power. Impulsive, Yu Qingqing rose to his feet angrily, then gritted his teeth and cried out in a low voice, "Go to the Great Hall and find out what Tan Lang is up to. From today on, I want to know everything he does. Mobilize all the disciples of Yu Academy in Mingu Province. No matter where he goes, what he does, what he eats, what he drinks, what he says, who he meets, and even which woman he sleeps with, I want to know everything." The crowd of men and women hurriedly bowed and answered. Their hearts were filled with respect and fear for their master, and for a moment, they felt that Yu Qingqing had grown much taller. Sighing softly, Yu Qingqing beckoned to one of his disciples. The disciple hurriedly pulled out a scroll from under his sleeve and handed it to Yu Qingqing respectfully. While Yu Qingqing was flipping through the scroll and reading the information on it, the disciple bowed slightly and began to introduce the information he had spent a lot of time gathering to Yu Qingqing and his brothers and sisters. The eyes of Yu Qingqing and his disciples lit up, and they nodded repeatedly, already having their own plans in mind. With King Yangqiu's status, power, and financial resources, it was almost certain that he would do everything he could to push Wu Qi into the realm of Supreme Oracle. Now, King Yangqiu could only rely on the Supreme Oracles of Yu Clan to act, and he could not completely control them. But Wu Qi was different. He had no foundation or background, and King Yangqiu had pushed him to the level of Supreme Oracle, so he was still at King Yangqiu's beck and call. He was wounded by a fiend immortal. Hundreds of millions of evil spirits poured into his spiritual ocean, and trapped and killed his soul? Even the oracles of Zhong Province's Directorate of Celestials said they could not save him? Only the Supreme High Priest can kill the evil spirit and save his soul? With a cold snort, Yu Qingqing said in a flat tone, "Tan Lang killed him, so why should we explain? Remember what happened 6 months ago. When I asked you and your senior brothers to serve in Yu Province, how did the prefecture overseer respond? Since he is unwilling to cooperate with us, I'll let him kill one of his sons as a warning. If he is sensible, he will naturally do as we say in the future. If he still doesn't understand how to cooperate with us, he will spend 3 months in seclusion to reflect on his mistakes. Next time it may not be a good time." Wu Qi, who was disguised as Tan Lang, was very impulsive. He could not believe that he killed someone in front of so many people. But impulsive young men were always easy to deal with. The man King Yangqiu had brought here was so impatient that even if he had some ability, he could not overpower Yu Qingcheng. It was obvious that in just 2 or 3 years, Tan Lang had not only made tremendous progress in magic cultivation base, but he had also organized a blood sacrifice and won the approval of the ghosts and deities in the outer realms. Unexpectedly, he now had a powerful ancestor god to worship. The ancestor god who could control thunderbolts seemed to be more powerful than Gui Xiao, the ancestor god worshipped by Yu Miao. At least, according to the information sent by the disciples of Yu Academy who witnessed the fight between Wu Qi and Yu Miao today, the ghost god, shrouded in thunderbolts, seemed to have rushed straight into Gui Xiao's lair to fight him. Yu Qingcheng liked pedantic people. Such people had a moral bottom line in their hearts, and they were also the easiest to deal with. He had merely insulted his own parents, and before he could even finish his sentence, he had brazenly killed them? Hee. What was the big deal about being insulted? Yu Qingcheng had done a lot of things over the years. If he could not let go of some of the perseverance in his heart, how could he make a name for himself in this world? In front of his male and female disciples, Yu Qingcheng squeezed the little maidservant's breasts, narrowed his eyes, and chuckled to himself. His disciples smiled apologetically and hurriedly tried to recall if their elders had offended their master in any way. If they had to send a letter back as soon as possible and ask them to apologize to Yu Qingcheng as soon as possible. Narrowing his eyes, Yu Qingcheng played with the little maidservant's body while analyzing Tan Lang's character to his disciples. With a cold snort, Yu Qingcheng took off his clothes and pressed the 2 maidservants down on the bed. It was in Ningbo City, High Province, when King Yongqiu was patrolling with his generals to prevent Myriad Immortal Alliance from stirring up trouble, that he first saw Wu Qi leading a group of weak soldiers and making a group of heaven immortals flee with their tails between their legs. Wu Qi's fighting style was very popular with King Yongqiu, and at that time, King Yongqiu had the idea of promoting Wu Qi. Later, when Wu Qi was serving in Bo Yenting's army, he actually broke a formation deployed by a gold immortal and killed more than 100 gold immortals of the alliance, which made King Yongqiu, who had suffered heavy casualties in the battle, decide to ask for Wu Qi's army from Bo Zhongfu. A few young men and women sat respectfully on 2 rows of stools in the tent, looking up at Yu Qingcheng with eager eyes. When the maidservant finished picking out one of his ears and he turned his head to change his posture, a young man in white rose to his feet, cupped his fist at Yu Qingcheng and said, "Master, youngest brother was killed by Tan Lang on the spot. How are we going to explain this to the prefecture overseer?" Yu Qingcheng smiled reservedly, then grabbed the scroll and hurriedly glanced at a line of words written in red with cinnabar. A freak who cultivated both fleshly body and magic already possessed the soul power of a 9-sun expert. That was to say, as long as he was not an idiot, he would certainly possess the cultivation base of a 9-sun expert in the future. Moreover, the advancement of human oracles was extremely fast, and it was not uncommon for those with excellent aptitude to become supreme oracles in just 100 years. Perhaps in just a few decades, Wu Qi would possess the power of a 9-sun expert, and he even had the potential to break through the realm of supreme oracles in the future. Yu Qingcheng took a sip of the fragrant tea with a few slices of fire ginseng in it, twitched his mouth slightly, and added disdainfully, "Pedantic." The scroll contained Wu Qi's personal information. Remember, you have to be prudent in your actions, and you must never be like Tan Lang, who would kill people at the slightest disagreement. After pondering for a long time, Yu Qingcheng's face grew gloomier and gloomier. Hundreds of millions of evil spirits. What kind of soul power was that? If Wu Qi had really escaped by absorbing the soul power of hundreds of millions of evil spirits, wouldn't that mean that his current soul power was comparable to that of a 9-sun great oracle? Perhaps the reason why King Yongqiu had hurriedly transferred Wu Qi to serve under him was not because of Wu Qi's ability to crack formations, but because of his potential for future development. Yu Qingcheng gave the maidservant's chest a hard squeeze and said angrily, "Why is that Tan Lang so lucky? Hundreds of millions of evil spirits invaded his body, and yet he still managed to survive? He is not a human being. He is a bastard." While Wu Qi and King Yongqiu were examining the formation through the map, Yu Qingcheng, who had just lost a great deal of face after having one of his disciples killed by Wu Qi, excused himself with a large group of his disciples and bid farewell to King Yangqiu. Then he left the great hall and returned to the tent where he usually lived. Apart from that, he even found out how Wuqi had fallen into King Yangqiu's eyes. Yu Qingqing's face gradually turned unsightly. Laughing strangely, he clenched his fingers and crushed the scroll into a puff of ashes. Nodding slowly, he said, "So that's how it is. Not only is Tan Lang's formation-breaking technique amazing, but it turns out that you have taken a fancy to this. He, an evil spirit refined by hundreds of millions of demon immortals. Even a Sun High Priest wouldn't dare to boast that he could survive such an attack, but this kid actually managed to escape from the damage caused by hundreds of millions of evil spirits." Pointing to his head, Yu Qingqing said in a reserved manner, "All of you are my proud disciples and all of you have brains. Those who work with their minds control others, and those who work with their bodies control others. It's like the difference between a rider and an animal. We are the riders and Tan Lang and the others are the mounts. You can kill with your mind, but never with your fists. We disdain to do such a vulgar thing." Chapter 688. After spending a full 2 hours studying the formation in the valley, Wuqi finally shook his head. "Your Excellency, I can only roughly see the layout of the formation from here. In order to see through it, I need to conduct a field survey." Even though Wuqi boasted that his attainments in the Tao of Formations were already unparalleled, the Tao of Formations he had inherited was too ancient, and he had suffered a loss in Miaoying Palace many years ago. So, he dared not say that he could crack all the formations. The grand array at the bottom of the valley looked like a grand array of stars. However, if he wanted to see through it completely, he would have to go outside the valley and carefully examine it. He could not use remote sensing to see the array. King Yangqiu folded his arms over his chest and stared at the map for a while, then asked in a flat voice, "Where did you learn the formation?" Wuqi pondered for a moment, then pulled out a palm-sized jade from under his sleeve. It was simple in shape, shaped like half a cloud, and was carved with extremely exquisite patterns of stars and mountains. The jade was simple in design, with 7 colored spots seeping into its interior, giving it an air of vicissitudes of life. Wuqi weighed the jade in his hand, then handed it to King Yangqiu reluctantly. "This is a catalogue of the Tao of Formations that I found by accident when I was hunting in the barren mountains of Anlu County." Wuqi looked at the jade in King Yangqiu's hand reluctantly and said in a low voice, "There is also a cultivation technique of the immortals in it, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't cultivate it. So, I just focused on studying the formation and ignored everything else." King Yangqiu fiddled with the heavy jade in his hand. Although it was only the size of a palm, it weighed nearly 1,000 kilograms. It was a supreme-grade cloud soul jade, a supreme-grade material used to make all kinds of immortal jade slips. There was a huge amount of information in it. Apart from a complete set of array formation explanations from 1 origin, 2 forms, 3 talents, all the way to the cosmic stars formation, as well as all kinds of ancient divination, prediction, psychic communication, and communication with the veins of the stars and the earth, there was also a complete set of immortal cultivation method, the Dongxian Supreme Sutra. King Yangqiu sent his divine sense into the jade block and quickly browsed through its contents. After wiping out all the immortal cultivation techniques recorded in it, he returned the jade block to Wuqi with a smile on his face. "Just as you said, the Array Tao catalog inside is not bad. Study it when you have time. However, the immortal cultivation techniques inside are evil and unorthodox techniques, so it's better not to leave them inside." King Yangqiu was very pleased. The fact that Wuqi was willing to give him the jade so frankly proved that he was very loyal to him. In this way, everything could be explained. How could Wuqi, a general of Deyu who was born in the wilderness, be so proficient in the Tao of Formation? With just a quick glance, King Yangqiu could tell that the Array Tao catalog in the jade block was extraordinary, much more brilliant than all the Array Tao catalog of immortals he had collected in his mansion. When Wuqi said that he could not cultivate the techniques in the Dongxian Supreme Sutra, King Yangqiu was laughing in his heart. "It would be a miracle if you could." According to the information about Wuxia obtained by King Yangqiu, Tanlang had figured out the technique of absorbing Pangu's sacred energy to temper his fleshly body in the wilderness, and then went to Anhe City to join the army. As long as one had Pangu's sacred energy in one's body, one could not cultivate any immortal cultivation techniques. This was an iron law that both the Celestial Court and Yu knew. Fortunately, this kid first comprehended the method to absorb Pangu's sacred energy before he found this jade slip. Otherwise, I would have lost a capable general under my command. TSK, I'm really lucky that he is proficient in the Tao of formation. King Yangqiu looked at Wuqi cheerfully, then suddenly asked, if you triple the size of East Sea County, can you let me make a copy of the Array Tao catalog of formation you have learned? I can guarantee that other than myself and you, there are at most 3 people in the world who can study this Array Tao catalog. Wuqi knew that this was King Yangqiu's condition. As a king who led the army personally, King Yangqiu could not have seen the value of the Array Tao catalog in the jade block. Triple the size of East Sea County? According to the current size of East Sea County, if it was tripled, Wuqi would have a province under his name. Even though the population of this province was small, it was still a province. Could the total land area of 100 myriad immortals planets be larger than that of Diyu's province? Without hesitation, Wuqi handed the jade block to King Yangqiu and said, what's the value of this? Your Excellency, you don't have to say that only 3 people can study it. As long as they are your Excellency's trusted subordinates, they can study it at will. My interest lies more in leading an army and fighting a war. As for breaking and dispelling formations, I really think it's a tedious task. King Yangqiu smiled with greater satisfaction and appreciation. He took the jade block, took out a jade slip, and made a copy of all the Array Tao catalog in it. Then he returned the jade slip to Wuqi, nodded and said with a smile, good, good. Tanlang, you have been so loyal and diligent to me. I will certainly not treat you unfairly. With a wave of his hand, he threw the jade slip to an oracle in a black robe standing behind him and said in a deep voice, Yu clan has been disrespectful to me. As for the compensation, well, I'll give them all to you. Later, I'll issue an official document to expand the land of East Sea County by 3 times, and then I'll give you a batch of people, livestock, seeds, and money so that you can develop East Sea County as soon as possible. Wuqi cupped his fist and bowed respectfully to King Yangqiu. How did he know I was blackmailing the Yu clan? He thought to himself. I suppose King Yangqiu has a lot of eyes and ears in Zhongning City. Wuqi stuffed the jade block back into the sleeve of his battle robe. He did not care about the Array Tao catalog copied by King Yangqiu. He had killed so many heaven immortals and itinerant cultivators on Pangu continent, and he had seized hundreds of Array Tao catalog and cultivation techniques. The Array Tao catalog he gave to King Yangqiu was nothing more than a doubling or tripling of the power of those itinerant cultivators on Pangu continent. Compared to the complex and vast essence of Array Tao in the Scroll of Stealing, it was like a stream in the middle of a vast ocean, not worth mentioning at all. Moreover, the ultimate heavenly cave scripture was looted from the private collection of an upper-tier heaven immortal whom he had killed. Although it was a good immortal cultivation technique, Wuqi was not interested in it at all. Putting it in the jade block was just to make King Yangqiu believe Wuqi's story. And this jade slip was made by Wuqi himself after he showed his ability to break the formation in Bo Yenting's army. Using the technique Lu Xiaobai used to forge cultural relics and antiques, and his current divine ability and magic power, he deliberately made this antique jade slip to cover up his lie. How could a General Diyu, who was born in the wilderness and cultivated the true body of heaven and earth scripture, be able to break the formation of Bo Yenting's army of 100,000 soldiers? Anyone would have such a question. And by making such a jade slip, he could not only clear his name, but also present it to King Yangqiu, which showed his loyalty. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And it could not have been more worthwhile. Sure enough, the Array Tao catalog that Wuqi looked down upon had brought real benefits to Wuqi. The territory of East Sea County had rapidly expanded by 3 times, which was equivalent to the territory of a province. Moreover, it was not under the jurisdiction of Zhong Province, which made Wuqi the local tyrant of the East Sea County. No one would care what he wanted to do. It was a very good deal. Not to mention the population, livestock, seeds, and money that King Yongqiu had promised him. With these things, Wuxia could definitely speed up the development of East Sea County. Especially with the influx of a large number of foreigners, the people of Great Yen who still stayed in Princess Zhongli's interstitial world could finally come out for a breath of fresh air. King Yongqiu was overjoyed, and so was Wuxia. In the Great Hall, many of King Yongqiu's subordinates were looking at the jade slip carefully in the black-robed oracle's hand with eager eyes. These days, King Yongqiu's army had suffered a lot in the face of the various formations laid out by Myriad Immortal Alliance. With this catalogue of formations, I'm afraid it will be the Alliance's turn to suffer, isn't it? Because it was Wuxia who offered the Array Dao catalogue, and it seemed that he did not understand its significance to King Yongqiu and even to the entire Great Yu army. What an honest and simple young man he was. The military officers around King Yongqiu also looked at Wuxia kindly, but at the same time, they were jealous of him. This guy's East Sea County was already ridiculously large. And now that it had expanded by 3 times, did that not mean that he had a province for nothing? A province, and a province directly under King Yongqiu's command. There was no doubt that the East Sea County would become King Yongqiu's most important nail in the periphery of Zhong Province, and Wuxia, who directly controlled the East Sea County, would also become a very important member of King Yongqiu's power system. With Wuxia's East Sea County, King Yongqiu had officially extended his hand into the periphery of Zhong Province, directly affecting several nearby first-grade provinces. Even though Yu Mu was also King Yongqiu's subordinate, most of the people in the Yu clan were loyal to Lao Wang. How could they be as loyal and reliable as Wuxia, who had been directly recruited and promoted by King Yongqiu? Happy Wuxia, King Yongqiu, and the others assembled the army and rushed out of the camp toward the huge valley ahead. Along the way, King Yongqiu kept Wuxia by his side, and personally introduced the various changes in the formation ahead to Wuxia, as well as the various scenes when the soldiers were killed in the formation. The military officers looked at the scene with envy and jealousy, knowing that Wuxia had become King Yongqiu's favorite. Like a torrent that had broken through a dam, the army of tens of thousands of soldiers crossed hundreds of miles in just a quarter of an hour, and arrived in front of the huge valley. There was a great commotion, and the roars of their mounts soared into the sky. Dozens of flying ships whizzed past overhead, and a large number of oracles hovered in the air, emanating a tremendous wave of energy that swept out in all directions. Such a great commotion immediately alarmed the immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance in the valley. Dozens of immortals flew out of the valley and stood on top of a few rocky peaks that were about 10,000 feet tall, cupping their fists and greeting the army with smiles on their faces. King Yongqiu, are you here to fight the formation again? How many men are you going to lose this time? A white-bearded old Taoist, clad in an apricot-yellow Taoist robe, carrying a 7 stars dragon fang sword on his back, holding a horsetail whisk in his hand, and looking like a transcendent immortal, taunted King Yongqiu. His tone was full of sarcasm and complacency. King Yongqiu gave the Taoist a gloomy look, but he did not get angry. When I break the formation, I'll definitely kill you with 1,000 cuts, and I'll have the whole army treat your wife and daughter well, he said coolly. As King Yongqiu's voice rang out, Wuxia rode to the edge of the valley and fixed his eyes on the valley ahead. Chapter 689. The immortals were looking at Wuxia, but Wuxia did not even spare them a glance. After glancing at the huge ravine, Wuxia slowly closed his eyes. Then he performed an incantation gesture with both hands and placed them over his eyes, murmuring a strange incantation in a low voice. The sunny sky suddenly darkened, and a chilly wind fell straight down from the sky, filling the air with dust and sand. A small whirlwind, no more than a foot high, spun and rolled up countless blades of grass and dust. King Yongqiu looked appreciatively at the weapon, while the generals around him exchanged glances with each other, their faces pale with fright. He was indeed a freak who cultivated both magic and fleshly body. There were so many princes and dignitaries in Diyu, but only a few of the oldest princes had such figures around them, and all of them were top experts in Diyu. And now, King Yongqiu had found such a freak. Unknowingly, the generals and oracles around King Yongqiu straightened their backs. A man who cultivated both magic and fleshly body was of great value to King Yongqiu. Only King Yongqiu's confidants knew that even among the upper echelons of Diyu, there were some conflicts that were not known to outsiders. Just like King Yongqiu and his brothers, there were all kinds of disputes between them. At all costs, even if I have to exhaust all the resources at hand, I must make him improve his cultivation base as quickly as possible. King Yongqiu clenched his fists tightly and made up his mind. At the same time, he felt a little headache. The fact that Wuxia cultivated both magic and fleshly body could not be kept a secret. He had to do his best to improve Wuqia's cultivation base, but some others would probably have to do their best to cut off Wuqia's head. A fierce gleam flashed across his eyes. King Yongqiu was indifferent to the provocation of those immortals from Myriad Immortal Alliance, but this time he clenched one of his teeth and broke it. Blood sprayed out of his mouth as he slowly swallowed the broken teeth and murmured in a low voice, "You are wrong, and I am right. I can't let you do whatever you want." A thick grayish-white aura poured into Wuqia's body like dragons, and amidst a shrill ghost howl, he slowly opened his eyes. His eyes had turned grayish-white, and two small ghost heads had appeared where his pupils used to be. The ghost heads were shooting out a thin grayish-white beam of light, which was so thin and weak that it penetrated thousands of miles through the faint mist in the valley ahead. It was one of the many-eye techniques of the Directorate of Celestials, the eyes of myriad ghosts. It allowed the user to gather the power of myriad ghosts in their eyes, allowing them to see through all the veins in the earth and the circulation of natural energy. When cultivated to the highest level, they could even peer into the yellow springs. Legend had it that someone had cultivated the eyes of myriad ghosts to an unimaginable level, allowing them to see the ghosts struggling and roaring in the transmigration under the yellow springs. Wuxia had not cultivated the eyes of 10,000 ghosts to a very profound level, and he had only been studying the various magic techniques of the Directorate of Celestials for about 2 years. How could he have the time to practice these mystic arts? But he had the chaotic divine eyes as his foundation, and with them as the foundation, he was able to exert the power of the eyes of 10,000 ghosts to a very powerful level in one fell swoop. Wherever the wisps of ghost light shone, the faint mist that the immortals from Myriad Immortal Alliance had deliberately created in the valley could no longer block Wuqia's eyes. In a flash, he had seen everything in the valley. The mountains and rivers map used by King Yongqiu was also an extraordinary treasure that could spy on the enemy's movements from hundreds of miles away. But its power was limited, and the mist that the immortals from Myriad Immortal Alliance had created in the formation had interfered with the mountains and rivers map. Only when Wuxia peeked into the formation with the eyes of 10,000 ghosts did he realize that the situation in the valley was very different from what he had seen in the map. Surrounding the small lake in the middle of the valley, and the gorgeous immortal pavilions were 12 peaks that stood 100 miles high. These peaks had been concealed by someone with the technique of bubble and shadow. The 12 peaks, each about 100 miles high and about a mile in circumference, had been compressed into 12 beautiful artificial mountains that stood no more than 100 feet tall. Surrounding these 12 peaks was a ring of 108 peaks, each 64 miles high. These peaks corresponded to the positions of the celestial Dipper star and the earthly Fiend star, and by drawing the star power down from the sky, they had formed the true forms of 108 celestial lords. Various spirit beasts, such as flood dragons, Pishio, Qilin serpents, bears, and wolves, were wheeling and roaring furiously. These true forms were condensed from starlight, and each of them contained a wisp of the divine power of the celestial lords. Once they were activated, their power was truly frightening. The celestial lords and the earthly Fiend star lords were the leaders of the celestial lords conferred by the celestial court, and each of them possessed very strong divine abilities and magic power. The formation of Heavenly Dipper and Earthly Fiend outside the celestial court was said to have the power to trap a top-grade primordial immortal. But now, it had drawn a wisp of the divine power of the celestial lords and the Earthly Fiend star lords, which meant that its power was not to be underestimated. Although it was impossible to trap a primordial immortal, it could easily trap hundreds of gold immortals. The 108 peaks had also been concealed by someone with a divine ability. They looked like a bunch of inconspicuous mounds of dirt piled up on the ground, and some ordinary thatched cottages had been built around them. The person who had constructed the formation was indeed a little abominable, as he was afraid that he would not be able to lure more people into the formation to die. Beyond these 2 rings of peaks were the 36,000 stone peaks that King Yongqiu had seen in the map, each of which was guarded by an itinerant cultivator, whose cultivation base was at least at the nascent soul realm. These stone peaks corresponded to the stars, and each of them was guarded by an itinerant cultivator, whose cultivation base was at least at the nascent soul realm. Everything was arranged according to the stars in the sky, including the 12 Yuanshan, the 28 mansions, the azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise. In the key parts of these star regions, the important peaks were all guarded by existences with the cultivation base of heaven immortals. In this formation alone, there were 1,080 heaven immortals guarding the foundation of the formation on the 36,000 peaks. What astonished Wuxia even more was that this formation was actually a complete formation with a complete set of formation instruments. There was an altar on each of the stone peaks, 3 offerings on each of them, and a 36 feet long flag flashing with a silver gleam, fluttering in the air. These flags were condensed from the star power, and they were flickering with the true shadow of the stars corresponding to the peaks, which had also attracted a wisp of the divine power of the corresponding stars. In addition to the arrangement on the peaks, there were also many weapons such as sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, hammers, and many other weapons flying in the air around each of the peaks. With just a glance at the weapons, Wuxia knew that they were all made according to the pattern of the weapons carried by the celestial lords of the stars in the sky. For example, the heavenly evil star usually used the 7-star dragon abyss sword, and there was a 6 feet long sword hovering next to the stone peaks in the heavenly evil star's position. Another example was the heavenly evil star usually used a pair of one-handed axes to chop off people's heads, and there were 2 8 feet long bronze axes the size of a door hovering next to the stone peaks in the heavenly evil star's position, glowing with a strong blood-red light. 36,000 stone peaks meant that there were 36,000 tailor-made immortal weapons flying in the air. Even Wuxia could not help but feel his scalp go numb at the sight. Heavens, how much effort did Myriad Immortal Alliance put in to lay out this formation? Although in Wuqia's Dharma eyes of 10,000 ghosts, all 36,000 sets of immortal items were the most ordinary 36 great immortal items, and their power was the weakest among all 36 great immortal items. But when so many of them were drawn by the formation and attracted the power of the stars, even a gold immortal would not be able to defend against them. Not to mention that the arrangement on the peaks clearly showed that the formation could attract the projections of the celestial lords in the sky to come down to help. If the projections of those celestial lords really came down to help, they could increase the power of the formation by more than 100 times. It was still impossible to kill a top-grade primordial immortal, but a low-grade supreme oracle like Yugu would most likely be trapped in the formation and unable to escape. Sucking in a cold breath, Wuxia turned his eyes to the pool in the middle of the valley. He had a feeling that there was something strange about it. After staring at the pool for a while, Wuxia had just used the 1,000 ghost eyes to see through a layer of drifting silver starlight over the pool. And when he saw a strong energy of pure spirit emanating from the bottom of the pool, a column of intense flame suddenly rose from the formation. The flame was pale gold in color and looked like melted glass, quiet and without the slightest violent aura. But as soon as it appeared, the 2 ghost heads in Wuqia's eyes exploded, and the grayish-white mist around him sprayed out in all directions while letting out shrill ghost howls. The small whirlwinds on the ground subsided abruptly as well, and the sun appeared out of nowhere in the sky, sprinkling its scorching rays down. A middle-aged Taoist clad in a pale gold Taoist robe, and holding a round mirror about a foot in diameter flew up on a white cloud. When he was less than 10 miles away from Wuxia, he let out a loud laugh and said, "My ignorance nearly allowed you to see through the formation, General." After laughing, the Taoist shook his head and said, "You're using the 1,000 ghost eyes, aren't you? To be able to see through my 10,000-mile grand array with a single glance. You must have spent at least 30 to 50 years of hard work on this 10,000 ghost Dharma eye. What a pity." My brilliant sun true flame mirror is specialized in breaking all kinds of ghost Dao spells, so I'm afraid you won't be able to keep your 1,000 ghost eyes. Wuxia shook his head and slowly took a few steps back. With a gloomy face, King Yangqiu drove the chariot a few steps forward and cried out coldly, Lord Wandering Immortal, you are one of the top figures in Myriad Immortal Alliance. Don't you feel ashamed to launch a sneak attack? This middle-aged Taoist was the Lord of Wandering Immortal Alliance? Wuxia retracted the 1,000 ghost eyes and looked at him curiously. 30 to 50 years of hard work. It had only been a few days since Wuxia began to cultivate the 1,000 ghost eyes, and his foundation was actually the chaotic divine eyes. So he was not afraid of the brilliant sun true flame mirror. The wandering immortal hall chief burst into laughter again. He heaved a long sigh and said, Shame? What's there to be ashamed of? I've only laid out a small formation, yet I've stopped the mighty King Yangqiu from advancing, and instead, I've suffered heavy casualties. What's there to be ashamed of? On the contrary, King Yangqiu, with his army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, can't do anything to me. That's a disgrace to King Yangqiu, isn't it? After laughing 3 times, Lord Wandering Immortal cried out, King Yangqiu, you've lost tens of thousands of soldiers in this formation last time, and only a few of your generals managed to escape. Now let me ask you, do you dare to enter my formation again? King Yangqiu did not answer. Instead, he turned to look at Wuxia. Wuxia pondered for a moment, then made a gesture of retreat. King Yangqiu nodded, raised his right fist, and waved it backward. The tens of thousands of soldiers immediately retreated without saying a word to Lord Wandering Immortal. All the immortals and cultivators in the formation were struck dumb. This was not like King Yangqiu's character. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.